Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lawsplaining the Interwebs. I am your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. And with me today is a very special guest who I am very excited to talk to. Came highly recommended several times from Super Chats from the good people of you out there watching. Hard Bastard. So, hey, buddy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. It's my pleasure. Like I said, I've been covering Vic Mignogna. I've been covering all of these stories, and the Mueller Report is getting closer to drop. And I swear, every single show, a couple people would drop a couple super chats just as you need to talk to Hard Bastard about the Mueller Report. So
I appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. So welcome, warm welcome. Let's take as people filter in, I like to get just like about 10 minutes of time before we get into the meat of it to let people kind of get their notifications and pop on. So why don't you tell me just a little bit about you and your channel, what got you into YouTube, if you want to talk any about your background and why that gives you any sort of special qualification on the journalism part, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any sort of qualifications as far as like journalism, but I started the channel in October 2016. And I first started out just kind of like doing anti-SJW stuff because I was like, at the time, a liberal. And I saw like the exploitation of like of racial shit by the activists that bothered me and shit like that. And then, you know, the election was happening. And so I decided to kind of start covering that. And I realized that like while I was watching like the corporate media, because they got so crazy with Trump that it reminded me of like the same propaganda techniques that the Jehovah's Witnesses use. I used to be in the Jehovah's Witness cult and I got out of that in 2007. So I think what kind of put the channel in the direction that it ultimately went into was that I got a Rachel Maddow segment and I looked at the like propaganda techniques that she was using and had like a Watchtower article, which is like the publication of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right. Yeah.
And it's different. Like one's politics and the other is religion, but it's a lot of the same shit. So that's, people seem to like that. And then I just would incorporate like daily news into like debunking media propaganda. And that's pretty much what started it.
Okay. So that's what you just said. All of that is absurdly interesting to me.
Sure.
So you said you were formerly liberal, but you're also Jehovah's Witness, which I thought, and maybe I'm wrong on this, my default assumption is that is a fairly conservative faith.
Yes.
So
it is.
Were you an outlier in Jehovah's Witness, or did you become liberal after leaving Jehovah's Witness?
It was, most of it was after leaving.
Okay.
So I left in like 2007, and I think that was like, so 2008 was like Obama, McCain, and I kind of started paying attention to news, and then all the shit happens, you know, with like Ferguson. I remember all the coverage of Ferguson. I guess that's what, like 2011, something like that, 2012.
Somewhere around there.
And so I kind of bought into that narrative for a while, the whole like, you know, black oppression, the whole like cops are genociding black people. Like I bought that shit for a while. And so once it got to the point where like I was on Twitter and I was like following like, I guess they called it like activist Twitter or black Twitter or whatever. So a couple of things that kind of woke me up. And while I was doing this, I was also like watching YouTube. So I was watching like the YouTubers like at the time that were big, like Amazing Atheist and also Thunderfoot and people like that.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't necessarily like married to any of these beliefs, because coming out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, you have a situation where your belief system is completely pulled out from under you. And that tends to have you, at least me, I was kind of more open-minded to like people challenging my beliefs. So these weren't like hard and set political positions. They were just what I kind of was exposed to in the corporate media when I came out of the cult. But like some of the moments that caused me to question was like, if you remember the UVA rape hoax. And,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. What was interesting about that is a lot of the activists still supported Jackie after it was clear that it was a hoax. And I just was like, how do you do that? You're supposed to care about rape victims. That makes it worse for rape victims. And then it turns out, you know, the activists are giving paid speeches about rape culture. And then I'm like, I see. It's like monetized. That's why they're advocating for something that's inexcusable.
And it's monetized at a shocking rate.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah,
these people with barely any credential to breathe, much less speak on an issue as intricate as like the demographics and societal impacts of rape, the reasons behind it, which of course are like shootings, right? They're extremely varied. I mean, you have rapes that are just like shootings, which they're very personal. They have a lot of drama behind them because oftentimes the victim is known to the assailant. And vice versa. And then you have like the completely different styles of rape that are random or they're targeted for a different reason than some sort of previous. I mean intimate in the true sense, not intimate in the sexual sense, but some sort of close bonded relationship that turns into abuse. And then you have this other one, which is almost like a stranger abuse. And it's like people going around speaking about rape culture. They conflate the two. They go ahead and mix motivations between them to fit their narrative. It's like, why are you being paid? I mean, they're being paid tens of thousands of dollars to do these speeches.
Yeah.
With little data to back it up and a whole lot of rhetoric that sounds the same. So that pisses me off, man.
Yeah, I mean, you had like the rape statistics they were saying, like on college campuses, like, well, I think 1 out of 4 women are raped. And so when I was like looking into this shit, the wage gap, all this shit, I'm looking into it. I'm like, wow, this is all bullshit. I'm like, so the government also, I mean, I knew the government bullshitted. I just didn't, the level, like the White House came out with that statistic, or at least touted it as far as the wage gap. And I'm just like, wow, this is also all bullshit. So I don't know, you get into this cycle of just kind of debunking bullshit, and then, you know, years pass, and then, you know, you just kind of find a niche and it works, or sometimes it doesn't. At least with me, I was lucky enough where it's working so far. Yeah,
man. Well, your channel's doing great. I saw you had a live stream going earlier today.
Yeah,
tons of viewership on that. That's fantastic. One thing you mentioned that really kind of caught my ear, because I think I'm in a similar boat, although I won't say as far in as Jehovah's Witness can go.
Sure.
But I was born and raised Catholic, and then once I got into college, my wife was not Catholic, or my fiance was not Catholic, who I later married, and then we sort of we went to like an evangelical church for a long time. And so that was like one uprooting of my faith values is
right.
Here I am in Protestant ground where I should be lighting the place on fire and calling them all heretics.
Right.
And I'm noticing very similar sort of things, but also key differences. And when I explore the differences, what I hear from them about Catholics is so wrong that I'm suddenly faced with the realization that what I've heard about Protestants my whole life is probably also wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I got older, I mean, in the past couple years, I've gone through a complete faith deconstruction where I'm still a Christian, but like the structures that I've been Christian under, I don't find any of them to be credible.
Right.
And so in that, and going through that sort of uprooting twice just in my faith life, and it sounds like you went through something similar with the Jehovah's Witness, that deprogramming, it does allow you to kind of engage challenges to your belief system and say, well, okay, I mean, fine, show me data, you know, show me evidence, point me to the reference, and that'll, you know, you're willing to take a critical approach. And I think I'm betting a lot of your viewers and a lot of my viewers have been through similar things. If they start digging through their past somewhere where it might not be religion, but it could be, I mean, it could be anything. And it's weird because you said that before the show, you were telling me that you covered comic stuff and stuff like that. I think a lot of people are going through that with their hobbies these days.
Yeah, like I don't necessarily like it, it's kind of like I like comic books, but I don't really like collect comic books. But when I see like SJWs going into these different hobbies and just taking them over and trying to kick the people that were already there out, I tend to cover that. Certainly not as much as politics, but it's similar in that, and also like with this kind of like deprogramming, it's definitely in the political world as well. There's a lot of parallels that I see of people being treated the same for their political beliefs. And it's like totally crazy where people, you know, they're losing family members because they support Trump or even Bernie Sanders during the election. And there are definitely a lot of parallels. So yeah, like sometimes I have a call-in show and people will call in and yeah, there's a lot of people that if they did not have the same experiences religiously, although I do get a decent amount of ex-JWs that watch, but the political side of it, where there's just this, and I don't know if it was always like this. It just seems like there's this new kind of zero tolerance for any dissent from like leftist ideology. And if you even breathe the word Trump, you're outcasted.
Right. And it's weird. That's actually why I got off of largely off of Facebook, because I found Facebook becomes immediately the place for political discourse. Except the problem is you're conversing with your friends and family. Yeah. And over the past, I mean, it started, for me, I guess it really kind of started 2012, the 2012 election, and then the 2016 election. It got so heated that I'm sitting here like getting screamed at or screaming at people who are very, very close to me, friends and family wise. I'm like, why am I arguing with these people that I want to actually like go see in a month or two? Right. You know, and so I've moved that onto Twitter, where I don't mind absolutely hammering someone that I'll never meet. Sure. That's great. But yeah, there's one thing I do want to say about Jehovah's Witnesses though, because I've talked about them a couple times on my channel, and for all of the culty aspects and the indoctrination that really does happen there, we have to give them some credit. Because we owe a lot of speech freedom to that Jehovah's Witness stuff. Oh,
their court cases are absolutely. You would obviously know this based on your field. Yeah, absolutely. The Pledge of Allegiance and standing up for the whole thing, where like they were trying to force the kids to do the pledge. The whole thing with field service and going out and knocking on doors. There was cases about that.
Right. Yeah, so that's just my one shout out to Jehovah's Witnesses. So we owe them a lot for freedom, but I do wish they would change some of their some of the ways they treat their congregations.
Right. I mean, that's what it is. The people themselves, I don't really have a problem with. A lot of them are very nice. I have pretty fond memories of the people. It's the leaders that I think are culpable, particularly for like the blood transfusion policy, how they're basically requiring you to die or your children to die. You either have to die rather than accept a blood transfusion, or you'll be disfellowshipped, which is basically like spiritual death, in that you'll be destroyed at Armageddon, and your friends and family, if they're Jehovah's Witnesses, are not allowed to talk to you anymore.
Yeah, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
We need to introduce them to the glory of the Emperor's Wrath of Warhammer 40K, where nothing can destroy you at Armageddon as long as
that would be good. That would be great.
Yeah, there we go.
They would probably lose their foothold on the flock if that was like an actual thing available to them. Because that's pretty much the fear that they put over everyone. And if you can deal with that, then yeah, they have no power.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. Just a brief tangent on that. Some denominations like Jehovah's Witness, and I don't know which other ones specifically, but there are some others out there are very good at that sort of threat. Others do it in very different and almost surreptitious ways. I know the Mormon Church. One of my oldest friends grew up in the Mormon Church. I believe he's still a devout Mormon. And when he and his mom got divorced from his dad, and he and his mom moved across the country so he could play hockey in a state with winter as opposed to Texas. When he moved, I mean, they were there to help them out. Like, she had a job and they had people there to help them unload from this church. that they'd never been to, never visited. They just basically sent an email and said, hey, we're Mormons down here in Texas. We're moving up to Minnesota. We need some help. And they, boom, 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 they had it all lined up. But of course, the implication is that if you leave,
right,
if you leave, that support network goes away and could even become a little bit hostile.
Yes.
I've seen that side of it too. But then even in the mainstream evangelical church that I'm in, the amount of most people are not like this, but the church community can turn on you very, very quickly if you happen to say the wrong thing, support the wrong position, show up at the wrong dinner.
Yeah,
it's amazing how people can leverage and weaponize people's beliefs in eternity against them, and that's terrifying to me from anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a propaganda technique. It's basically a technique, or I guess not necessarily a propaganda technique. It'd be more like a mind control technique. But like, what's interesting is people will do that on their own sometimes. So like, people will ask me like if I think like certain religions are cults. And some of them, it's harder to say, because a cult is basically if there's a top-down leadership that's kind of enforcing this sort of mind control. Whereas if it's like a church where that's not happening, but maybe the people themselves are doing it, it's not really a cult, but they're kind of using the same tactics. And yeah, that's pretty much like my stance on religion. Like that's pretty much where I draw the line. Like I don't really care what people believe. I'm not. I'm actually much more now that like we've kind of come out on the other side of the gay marriage debate. We've had a very long time to see where the left would go. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that shit. I mean, I still think gay people should get married. I have no problem with gay people. I really, that's no issue. But some of the slippery slope arguments that the conservative Christians were making in like, I don't know, I guess it was like 2008. Yeah, they were right about some of that shit as far as like they'll use this and then they'll go for even more shit. And I thought, oh, that's ridiculous. What are they going to go for? And but I think
attracted persons are on the agenda, man.
Yeah,
Pedos everywhere.
I covered the Slate article. I think it was a Slate article where it's like this new category, the non-offending pedophile that is, you know, safe to leave your kids with. Like, what the fuck?
Nope. Not even once. They go because do you want your kid to be the one where they go from non-offending to offending? It's like
same. Or did you see? How about there was a Huffington Post article that talked about how it was unfortunate that society was still not that accepting of people that wanted to fuck dolphins. I'm serious. It was not an Onion article. Dead serious.
I know. I'm dying because I like to forget that things like that exist, and then no, they don't. I mean, yes, they do. No, they don't not exist. Yeah. Real quick, I've got one super chat I want to address. Yeah, sure. Mithran Emra says the Amish and Mennonites practice shunning, if I recall. It's like, yeah, but they can't do it very well on Twitter, so I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, they're not allowed to use technology, right? The Amish and the Mennonites.
Yeah, that was the joke. So.
Oh, I got you.
Anyway, well, I mean, that's cool, man. I think we probably have a lot of similarities going down those roads. I mean, I was hyper conservative, and when I say conservative, I still am wildly conservative, but I was more, I guess, conservative minded than libertarian minded than I am now. And I really cared about the gay marriage stuff. And in some extent I still do, but my position is I actually just don't want the government marrying anybody. Like why are they? Oh,
I got you. Why are they involved? Yeah, I got you.
Right. And then people can go do whatever weird cult practices they want. I don't care. I don't care what you do in the dark. The only cultish thing I do is eat the blood of my enemies. But aside from that, it's all very mainstream. But, well, thanks for giving me that background. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we start moving, before we take our hormone therapy and transition into talking about Trump and Mueller and Russia and all of that?
No, I mean, just basically, I think like that background is what is kind of the lens I look through shit now. Like when you've gone through like the programming and you kind of like, I think you'd mentioned this before, like my position on all this shit is if you make an assertion, you have to provide evidence. Like the person making the assertion has to provide evidence for the assertion. And I think that's pretty much what I came away with after leaving the cult. And I kind of apply that same thing to this shit with the news.
Yeah, I think that's the news. And if I may muse on this a little bit, I think the media is adopting the legacy, not just legacy news, legacy media, legacy companies that are getting outdone, but the news and mainstream television and movies, we're seeing this because guys like you and I can come out and speak to an engaged audience every day. At any time of day, we can speak to them. People will listen to us, and we are able to build up rapport and credibility. Did you see that report that came out last year, the Alternative Influencers Network?
Oh, what a bunch of bullshit. Yeah, yeah. What a joke.
But one thing that report was dead right on, although they were calling it a bad thing, this is what blew my mind, is they said that these people are able to go out and they build rapport and trust with their audience.
That's true, yeah.
And then they're able to deliver information to them. And it's like, well, yeah, it's not a bad thing. That's the whole thing that the media has missed, is that our country was built by a very competitive media market where they relied entirely on the amount of rapport, trust, and credibility that they could build. It wasn't impugned upon them by White House press correspondence and the White House press dinner and and all of these credentials. It used to be just like several papers in one town would compete, and people liked the paper they liked because they liked the writers and they trusted them. And we're moving back towards that. And so I think that cult comparison is an organic reaction to their own demise. The death of their credibility, because people are seeing once a single independent journalist was able to get out on the internet and be like, by the way, I actually checked this out and that's bull.
Right.
Suddenly the veneer was gone, and they've been dying ever since. And so I think that cult control that they're going for and using those techniques is them trying to keep their vice grip on what they have.
Now they're going with trying to get the social media companies to censor people that they don't like, and that's and they always come up. They first, the way they get their foot in the door is they come up with an example that they think will get the least amount of people to care. So they'll go after a person. They'll label the person a neo-Nazi, and a lot of people, they're like, oh, whatever, it's a neo-Nazi. And then they're like, okay, now the next group, which would be the people who are misogynists, or they'll say, like, now they're going after anti-vaxxers. And look, a lot of this shit, I don't even care. I don't really care what people's position is on a lot of this shit. I advocate for the space for these people to have the conversations. And they're trying to take that away. They're trying to label certain conversations off limits. And so that's one of the other things that I think that, at least with the audience, that I try to do is just kind of like facilitate conversation, regardless of like what people's beliefs are, whether they're like mainstream beliefs or whether they're fucking far out, fringe shit.
Yeah, well, and what they're cashing. How do I put this? They're throwing away their credibility in the wrong ways, because if you're pro-vaccination, the worst way to convince an anti-vax person to become pro-vaccine is to silence them. That will never, ever convince them. You will do the exact opposite. You will drive them into their position. It will solidify their correctness, because that's how deeply ingrained beliefs have worked forever. I mean, when you have this deeply ingrained belief, no matter where it comes from, and someone comes along and says, you're so wrong that you can't speak, they say, aha, they're scared of me. I know I'm right. That's the opposite of what you, especially like if you're a person who is very pro-vaccine, believes in herd immunity and all that stuff, then you definitely don't want to silence the anti-vax people. you want to allow them the forum to voice their opinion and then be beaten back by better evidence. And if you can't do it, then maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you're wrong. I mean, that's at the end of the day. Check your own beliefs. Get smarter about yourself. But yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, at least when I was younger, when I would go out like door knocking, it depended on the religion. Some of the religions, like the born agains, they were happy to debate you, and then like we were kind of pushed away from debating people. But there were other religions that would like not have any sort of conversation to Jehovah's Witnesses, and the argument they would make is they're afraid of us because we're right. And I'd be like, oh yeah, good point. Why else would they, you know? And that's a very effective. I guess it's an emotional argument, but it's very effective because it doesn't really, like, the merits of someone's beliefs should be the deciding factor, not. So it's probably like an emotional argument, but it's very effective. Stuff like that's very effective. So yeah, when they censor any of these groups that they censor, they're giving them a point. And even if they're not giving them a point, they're making them look empathetic and look like that they're being victimized. Like Alex Jones looks like a total martyr at this point.
Yeah, and he is.
Yeah,
like
he is. It's
crazy. It's like he's just a crazy guy, to you guys at least. He's just a crazy guy that you've ignored for years, and suddenly you're making him the most important voice of all this stuff, and giving him, you're granting him the power that you don't want him to have. It's amazing how short-sighted this is of you. But I mean, I love Alex because you've got to have that guy who's willing to say the things that some people, even reasonable people, think it a little, at least for a moment. They'll be like, maybe he's the guy who will come out and just say it.
Yeah.
And it's like, then you get to start testing it. But a lot of people are either afraid to say it. And Alex is a good reason why they should be afraid to say it.
Oh, because
what happened to him with his kids, and now what's happening with him over the Newtown stuff and the Pepe poster. I mean, he's fortunately able to afford to pay for this due to years of success. But I mean, it's got to be trying on him, man.
Sure.
I don't envy being in like 4 different lawsuits at once over the past 2 years. But
that's crazy. And like that's, I think, one of the problems. Like the people who are advocating for the censorship have too much control right now, and they can be effective in people. They can cause people to lose their jobs for wrong things. So I think you have a lot of the population that's scared to share their opinions, and they're quiet and they just go along because they don't want to lose their jobs or be outcasted. Yeah. Well, this whole idea of you said a wrong opinion on Facebook or Twitter, you're fired forever. Right. Like, where did that even come from? It's insane. I know. I mean, I worked in banks, I worked in financial institutions. Now I'm a lawyer, and in all of those fields where you expect to be populated by rational people, I'll tell you firsthand that the people running those groups on the practical level, your bank branch managers and the managers above them, and even the managers above them who are running, like statewide banking systems. Some of these people are flat out nuts. They're absolutely crazy. And if we're firing people for dumb opinions, they're on the chopping block. Yet here they are successfully managing billions of dollars of business on the daily. And it turns out that it's just fine. Even if they have a wrong opinion or two, they're able to competently do work. So this whole thing is just, it blows my mind every day that we're surrendering all of our autonomy to the will of a Twitter mob over like short-lived fad thinking. Seems like it's getting worse. And long term, I have a positive outlook, but short term, like, this could get really nasty before it's resolved, because this is something that has to be resolved. You cannot have just a continual acceleration in draconian levels of censorship to all these people. That's not going to, you can't do that. That's not going to be good. Right. Have you ever killed animals in close quarters combat? No, can't say that I have. Can't say that I have. I have, because I live out in the country, and I made a very dumb choice. That we had raccoons eating our cat food.
We had outdoor cats, and I was going through like 16-pound bags of cat food in like 3 days. Because these big raccoons would come in and they just, you know, I didn't want to go out in the winter, especially. You don't want to go outside every day and drop a scoop of cat food. So you just get one of those big automatic feeder things. Right. And so I'm filling up this thing, and I trapped 2 of the raccoons in the shed. And I had this bright idea that I'd go in there and just kill the animals up close. And so I go and I lock myself in a shed, and I have a light and I have a hammer and a knife. Because this is before I owned a gun. And then I just realized that I had locked myself in a shed with freaking raccoons. And this is how I analogize what's going to happen is I was never in more danger from those raccoons than I was when I was right about to kill them. Because they were cornered, they were terrified, and I had to get very close. And that's what's going on with all of the media. That's what's going on with the social justice stuff is as we get closer and closer to overturning it, as a pendulum starts to get to the end, that'll be their maximum amount of power. And it'll be really terrifying for people in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it's yeah. You guys live out in the country. Live out in the country. You find all sorts of ways to kill animals that are threatening your family and your livestock.
I'm right outside a city, so I can't comment. And then Minnesota is very cold, right? So it's probably like Philly gets cold winters, but I think from what I understand, Minnesota is another level of cold that I don't even think I've experienced.
Oh man, we had a 2-day cold spot in January where the air temperature was like -28 to -32, but the wind chill was -60 something.
Jesus.
And I went to the store, and the dumb thing is it's so cold that it doesn't really matter. Like your body doesn't care. So as long as you know you're not going to be trapped somewhere, you could just wear, like I just threw on a hoodie and jeans to go to the store because it's a 30-yard walk from my car to the door. In that walk, I put my hood up and I get out of the car. I'm like, it's not so bad. And then the wind blew and my hood froze. It crystallized.
Oh my God.
I had like this stiff hood to pull off.
Jesus.
It was nuts. I was like, God, I hate this state so much sometimes.
Wow. How long does winter last? Like, is it a brutal long winter that lasts almost to the summer, or like do you get a spring?
We have right now. We're kind of going into spring. I mean, we actually got over 60 the other day, but it's been hovering in the upper 30s to low 40s for the past week or so. We do have usually we'll have a nice spring. The past couple of years though, winter will carry straight through April, and that sucks. Those are the most depressing years because it's like, oh, by that time you just want it to end. But it looks like we're gonna have it looks like winter's about over. And of course, since I said that, we'll probably have snow in June now. But,
sure, yeah.
No, it's not too bad. And summer's absolutely beautiful. So.
That's good. At least you get that.
Yeah. Well, let's start talking about this Mueller thing.
Sure.
Because I think that media has been trying to control the Trump narrative since 2015.
Yeah.
I mean, and one of my favorite. Do you know who Dan Carlin is at all?
Dan Carlin? No, I don't believe so.
He's a former well, I think he's still a broadcaster of some sort, but he has a great podcast called Hardcore History, where he does these deep dives into major historical events. And he has another podcast called Common Sense. And what's great is to go back to the primary season and listen to the episodes of Common Sense as Carlin is rejoicing that Bernie Sanders and Trump are in the election, not because he thinks either of them are going to win, but because he's just wanted independent voices in the prominent parties, because he hates the party system. But he's wanted these independent voices to come up and start questioning the status quo. So he's like, yeah, I love that Trump's out there in these debates. And he's saying stuff that I would say. I would never support him for president. And to watch his transition from marveling at these people into abject horror as Trump gets the nomination and then goes on to win the election. It's one of the funniest things. But, you could see that. And he's a traditional media guy, but I don't want to like besmirch Dan Carlin. He's great commentator, very smart guy. And he's not like a sold out hardcore leftist. He's very much an independent, very anti-corporatist, very anti-centralized power from either the corporate or government side. So he's cool, but it was like watching all these news stories and their narrative on Trump being like a joke candidate to being someone who could never win, to the point where they're weeping on election night.
Yeah.
They've been trying to control that narrative since 2015. And then they latched onto this Mueller investigation and have been milking it for 2.5 years, like Luke Skywalker sucking the blue milk out of that stupid thing. Yeah. Just hoping to God that Mueller would come out and say, impeach him tomorrow. And then what happened?
Yeah, it blew up in their face. What's interesting about the Barr, they can call it a memo report or whatever, is that there's a lot of people in independent media, on Twitter, people that, whether you're at work, whether you're dealing with family, that from the beginning called bullshit on all this, because there was no evidence. I mean, if you really want to go back to the core here, there was never any evidence that Russia hacked the election. You had the first goalpost that was set was Russia hacked the election to help Donald Trump. That was like, I guess, right after the election. So there was, in October 2016, there was like this joint statement released by the security apparatus that they said they were confident in their assessment, but they still didn't provide any evidence. And so to see, it's kind of like vindication for a lot of people to see Mueller, of all people, not even indict a low-level campaign person for Russian collusion. That's just, I don't think it could have come out worse for the media, because even if they would have indicted a low-level person for Russian collusion, they could have at least pointed to that for like a narrative. But Mueller did give them something that they can use for the narrative. But the key part where it said that the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. That's a devastating sentence for Russiagate.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't even find. They tried. They really tried. We joked before. We were joking before the stream of George Papadopoulos. Oh yeah, that was like they thought they had something hard with that guy. They're like, yeah, this guy was talking to. He met a Russian on a train in England or whatever. It was like the perfect spy novel story. And he's like, would like to talk to president. Right. It'd be okay if you arrange meeting. And they had that narrative. And then all they could tag this guy on, because all they could tag him on was a lie, because he had an inconsistent statement. And the funny thing is that, like, I covered this back when it happened. The most frustrating part of it was, why did you lie about what happened? Because nothing that you did was even wrong, much less illegal. They couldn't find anything. I mean, the whole thing was, well, they talked to Russia. Well, yes,
it's not illegal.
Yeah, that's very not illegal, and it actually makes sense for a serious presidential candidate to start talking to foreign powers about what they're, and start building policy bridges here and there. There are some minor rules about what they're doing. They can't accept money from them. They can't try and do a quid pro quo. But outside of that, I mean, certainly starting to establish those connections, talk about what those countries are interested in, finding foreign policy conversations to have about them. That's actually reasonable. But even then, they couldn't even get good evidence of that. Yeah. All they could get was that one guy went off on his own, tried to set up meetings, and was routinely rebuffed by upper level campaign officials. They're like, nah, if you want to go do it, go do it. We're not worried about that right now. Oh my gosh.
The manufacturing of quote unquote evidence with all this is fascinating, because like now we're starting to get the story, and I hope Trump sticks by his word that these people are going to be investigated. But you have, like, for example, the Trump Tower meeting. Now we have details of how that all transpired. And so you have this Fusion GPS, which is like an operation you hire to find dirt on political opponents. They're getting paid by the Clinton campaign. And then you got this guy who is the Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, who's coordinating with Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson. And then they're also obviously coordinating with Christopher Steele, who was also by coincidence employed by Simpson. And then the lawyer to this meeting, the Trump Tower meeting, was a Glenn Simpson client. And then she recently stated publicly that she used talking points developed by Simpson to use during the meeting.
Wait a minute. Is that the Trump Jr. meeting that was?
Yes, this is the Trump Tower.
Okay, yeah. I haven't heard this. this. So you're telling me that because that was, you know, that was their knife in the heart for a while too, is that that the Trump kids met with this high-level Russian agent, this attorney who was connected directly to the Kremlin. Turns out she's actually a client of a lawyer that is working with the DNC on finding this evidence, and she just admitted to using talking points developed by that guy. So why isn't that on the front of every newspaper?
Because they suppress it all. They suppress it all. So the Trump Tower meeting, really this whole thing is one giant gay op, and it didn't work. And so he even had dinner with her the night before the meeting, Simpson. So like, it's, I guess, just a coincidence that they had dinner. So you basically have the guy from the outfit that the Clintons hired to find dirt on Trump, set up the Trump Tower meeting and wrote the notes for one of the people in attendance.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. And yet when people ever bring up that, you know, they're trying to set up Trump, they're trying to destroy Trump, this is all just a game. And full disclosure, you probably don't know, I was not a Trump supporter. I certainly was not a Hillary supporter. I've been basically a Republican. I voted Republican my whole life up until the Trump election, because and this, of course, has backfired on me in several ways, but I was very concerned about statements Trump made that I thought implicated his ability to defend free speech. Mm-hmm. He said statements about the media that which the media is an absolute dumpster fire, don't get me wrong, sure, but I think the president has a special responsibility to make sure the media has its freedom. Mm-hmm. And he said statements that deeply concern me, and he has some differing views on due process and security that I as a defense and privacy, I should say, that I as a defense attorney have troubles with. So those were my big hangups. And then of course he's been better on that stuff. Yeah. Even though he had bad statements, he's been better on that stuff than many of the other people, to the point of even firing Sessions, who I thought was an absolute trash heap of an AG. Yeah, yeah. Especially his stance on weed and stuff like that. Sure, needs to go. And it looks like he's just getting better and better as he's going. And it's like, well, he's like giving me reasons to vote for him in 2020, and I'm gonna have a real interesting 2020 election when I thought it was just gonna be boring. But But yeah, I mean, this guy who talked a big game about all this stuff that worried me, turns out he's better on journalists than Obama ever was. Yeah. And of course, I knew Obama's just a snake anyway. Sure. But he's better on journalists than Bush was. Mm-hmm. He's better on executive orders than both of them. It's like he's not murdering people with drones. He's not bombing Syria at the same rate. It's like, come on. How is this guy? This guy has been better on all of this stuff than any of these people. Yet the way he talked and the way he was, or at least the way his words were portrayed, he was supposed to be so much worse. And it's crazy. Yeah, I started out, I was going to, early on, I was going to hold my nose for Clinton and vote for Clinton. And then she talked about, she wanted to put a no-fly zone in Syria, which there was a general that testified that would require a war with Russia. And I'm thinking, wow, she's fucking crazy. I'm like, well, why would you do that? And so then I thought, okay, she's crazy. And then the media, it's weird. Like when I first started watching the election coverage, the Trump people, the surrogates, they go on CNN and they would try to defend Trump in a manner like Trump's not politically correct, and they would try to act like he was in the very beginning. And I was like, oh, that's disingenuous. Why are they doing that? But then just the media went full-blown crazy, and the people that I actually disliked, I started to like, because
the media went so crazy, it made Trump almost look sympathetic. And so, yeah, by the time the election came around, it was, I voted Trump. I don't see, like in 2020, I don't see anyone that they could possibly come up with. I just think, the blow that it will give the Democrats to lose to Trump in 2020, I think that has to happen. If there's any hope that they kind of dismantle and regroup or have some sort of autopsy and try to figure out what happens, because they're not going to do that now, because they're still doing the same stuff that they lost on. Same identity politics, same, if you don't agree with us, you're a Nazi. Walls are immoral, just completely insane. I mean, they're even worse, I would argue. The whole thing with the late term abortion, and then you got Northam with the, it looked like he was talking about what you would do in the case of a post-birth when it comes to abortion.
Yeah, that was a really, really uncomfortable statement.
That was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy.
We'll have to get the mother's idea on what to do. It's like, wait, then what? You put a pillow over it? Like what?
Like, what are you talking about the life of the baby here? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so anti-abortion that it's sad, but that stems partly from my religious belief and partly from my belief that the right to life trumps the right to just about everything else. So it's like, man, I just can't figure out what justification there is to deny life to a baby.
Yeah.
And if it's like the mother's convenience, like, well, I'm sorry, we might need to find another way to deal with that. That's just, we just might have to do that, because to me, it's like, a lot of people are inconvenient for their family members. That doesn't mean we just gun them down.
Right. Yeah, the Democrats going more and more extreme on abortion is turning me in the other direction. I wouldn't say that I'm anti-abortion at this point. I do think that early term I'm okay with, but if we get to a point where we're going to have to choose between what they want to do, which is at any time for any reason, and also not even now, it's like they change it. It's not just a doctor that can perform it. A practitioner or a nurse or anyone at any time can basically perform an abortion. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that seems to be what they're trying to go for. If you have to choose between people who are insane and then going conservative in the other direction, I think I got to go conservative in the other direction, even though early term, I'm not necessarily against, but it's an evolving position at this point because the Democrats are being so crazy.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm opposed to it in pretty much in almost every case. However, I'm willing to concede that there's a point where a woman is doing the procedure herself, and I don't mean a coat hanger, right? I mean,
right.
I mean, she's taking some abortifacient drug,
sure,
or whatever. That's one thing. That's one thing. But when you've got a doctor and a nurse standing there performing a procedure to kill the life inside the mother, that's no longer just this choice of her and her respecting privacy, because in every other area where we consider privacy, the moment you disclose as part of business a private matter to a third party, you have made it no longer private.
Yeah.
And this is Fourth Amendment stuff, but the cases go back to bank and telephone cases. You don't have a right to privacy in the phone numbers that you dial because the phone company needs to know what phone number you dialed. And you share that information with them, so it's no longer private. Bank accounts, you don't get to deposit money into a bank and then claim that that's entirely private, at least as far as Fourth Amendment goes, because you're giving the information of your deposits to the bank and they have a reasonable business necessity to know what deposits you made, mainly so they can give you your money back. So if you're depositing $10,000 a day, they think you're a coke lord, right? That's just how it goes. Mm-hmm. So it's we're inconsistent in how we apply this when we're suddenly a woman can go into an abortion clinic and tell every single person on staff everything about her body, including getting very invasive procedures done to check on her. But when the government wants to say, now, wait a minute, what's happening here? Suddenly that's off limits. Wait, this is inconsistent with every other part of privacy. And the thing that really bothers me about it, not that, I don't know why we're discussing abortion right now, but,
yeah, it's one of those things.
But we are. The thing that really bothers me about it is it's a right that is only exercised by pregnant women who want to kill their baby. Like that's the only segment of the population that can exercise this right, because a man who's about to become a father cannot do the same thing.
Right.
They can't have any say in this outside of just their personal communications, but they have no legal authority to do it. They have no protection in the privacy of it, and they can't remove themselves from the situation. They can't say, you know what, if you're going to keep this baby, I'm not going to pay for it. They can't do that. And until we have some sort of parity of rights, then it's not equal protection under the law. And that really bothers me. It offends me at a deep level. But
yeah, I mean, they have to, I have no faith that they're going to do this, but they have to figure out where to draw the line. There has to be a reasonable line drawn. Like if they argued as far as if it reaches the point where another party has to be involved in the procedure, then it would be illegal. I would support that. It's that the problem is if they don't do anything, then we're basically, there's no compromise. We're basically left with crazy insanity, which barbaric, like, I mean, that's the other thing. When I started to really like research the procedures for late term abortion, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like watching like war footage. It really shows you what the procedure is. And once you see that, like, you know, it's obviously murdering a life. I think it's like, it's just the way they talk about it. Sometimes they act like, you know, the parts are not, it's not like human remains. They act like it's like medical waste. So they like try to, and that's the other thing, the way that they try to act like the procedures are not a big deal. And they kind of like sugarcoat it, but, so that can't continue. So yeah, if it's a decision between what they're currently doing or just cutting it off completely, if you look at like the net result of either side, while the conservatives, like particularly like, you know, it's funny. I remember like, I guess, I don't know, the early 2000s is when like conservatives were having a bad time with people in the media saying crazy shit. So you had people say things like life begins at like right when two people fuck, that life exists right there. And there's no, you know, like life begins at penetration, like just crazy stuff. Right. But if you look at what the net result, even if a person is strict like that, and you look at the net result of the way the left wants to do it, I think just as far as harm reduction and trying to, I think we should probably try to lose the least amount of lives possible in any sort of policy decision. You have to go with the conservatives. It's a crazy, I don't want it to be like super strict and crazy, but if it has to be, compared to the other option, I don't think the other option is sustainable. It's completely barbaric.
Right. And then the interesting thing, I mean, we had that New Zealand shooter, you know, and the key point of his manifesto, at least what he said was the key point, is it's the birth rate, right? Like that. Right. So, and I mean, obviously the words of a mass shooter aren't important, but there are a lot of people who are concerned with birth rates amongst westernized countries being on a steady decline. And part of that is the fact that we off 1 million of them every year. There's 1 million babies not being born.
Right.
And that's a very interesting sort of clash there between ideals. But anyway, let's get back to Mueller. Sorry, I don't know how this is my brain works with just ridiculous tangents. And so I want to get back to the Mueller thing. So they released a summary of the report. Right. But there's a redacted report. And now I just saw today the Democrats are authorizing a subpoena for the unredacted report. Do you know anything about, like, I guess, I don't know what else.
Well, actually, as far as the unredacted report, this is actually probably would be more your area. So it contains grand jury information. And I'm just curious of how that would be allowed, that they would be able to see. Are they allowed to see grand jury information? Isn't that like a sacred, considered like a sacred thing that there's, you know, you wouldn't allow that? It seems like they want a fully unredacted, I guess as members of Congress, would they be allowed to do that? That seems like
well, I mean,
unbelievable.
It depends what's in there, but grand jury, you know, grand jury hearings are not always sealed. Oftentimes they're not sealed. But it's usually they're not, well, oh no, I'm trying to think. Well, you mentioned Ferguson earlier, right?
Yeah.
Mike Brown killed by Darren Wilson. Darren Wilson, the grand jury refused to indict him.
Right.
In a very correct decision, refused to indict him. I'm a guy who's very anti-cop violence.
Sure.
Just in general, but that was appropriate cop violence, 100%. And one of the ways I'm confident, or reasons I'm confident in that position, is because the entire grand jury file is unsealed. You can see the forensic reports. You can read the transcripts of the witness testimony. All of the people who are on the news saying "hands up, don't shoot," and his back was turned, and all of that. Once they got under oath in front of a grand jury, their stories changed dramatically. I didn't actually see him. I heard that his hands were up. But you know what? It doesn't really make sense, and all this stuff. All that changes, and that's one reason I know that I'm able to be very confident in the position that shoot was very good. And I'm always skeptical of juries on cops, because there's a cop bias with juries. We're programmed to trust the guy in the uniform,
right?
But no. So as far as unsealing the grand jury documents, I don't think there's any problem on its face of that. I think the problem is likely around the fact that we're talking about high-level government officials. We're talking about foreign policy documents being out there. We're talking about interactions with a not ally and a potentially hostile foreign power, and what that could do. And the interesting thing would be, you know, are the Democrats willing to risk national security issues just for the political points that they hope to carry into the 2020 election? Because
I think they will. Oh yeah, they'll definitely do it.
Oh, I think right. I think they will, because they're stupid.
Yeah,
I mean that's the reality. That whether or not anybody out there is a Democrat is irrelevant. The DNC is off of any reservation they've ever been on. Oh, they are nuts. They're frothing at the mouth, and they're lost. And what they're doing, I mean, the fact that they would be willing to risk a national security crisis with one of the most dangerous countries to the United States interest, which would be Russia, is just to try and dunk on Trump in a 2020 ad that won't even be important for their election, is beyond me. Like that. Oof.
It's interesting. So, yeah. I think their goal is to spin whatever's in the report, but no, there's not going to be further indictments. And so there's nothing in there. Like, they're almost acting like Mueller is lying, or Barr is like almost like has Mueller tied up in a basement somewhere, and Mueller has actual indictments in the report, and Barr's trying to hide them. They completely ignore the fact that Mueller signed off on Barr's letter. And just from the standpoint of that, there's no indictments coming. Don Jr. is not getting indicted. Trump's not getting indicted. Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump. These are all the people that they claimed. I mean, you had people like David Pakman claiming that Donald Trump Jr. is hiding in Canada because he knows an indictment is coming, and just all this bullshit that they've been saying for 2 years, and it's not happening. And but I think part of this whole thing has been bullshit from the beginning, like all of this. And what's interesting is I did not ever trust Mueller. I don't think Mueller has a good reputation. But like what they'll do now is they'll say, well, it says Russia didn't, or a Trump campaign didn't collude with Russia. However, Russia interfered in the election. That's still a bullshit narrative, because they never provide any evidence to support that Russia hacked the DNC. They did provide things that they claimed was evidence, but you had like the CIA report. The first one was about like malicious Russian cyber activity, but it was basically a document that just talked about how hackers use spear phishing. And then the rest of the document was just kind of how to keep your network safe from hackers. There was nothing in there that was evidence. It also had this ridiculous warning on it. It was like almost like a warranty. It says something was like the DHS does not provide any warranties of any kind regarding the information contained within the document. So basically, like, if this turns out to be bullshit, it's not our fault. The second thing that they came out with a few weeks later from that was another PDF. Now, this is where I think the first major goalpost moved, because the first goalpost was Russia hacked the election to help Trump. Then they moved it to Russia influenced the election to help Trump. And they basically defined influencing as if Russia was disparaging to Hillary Clinton, if they said negative things about Hillary Clinton, they were influencing the election, which was ridiculous because now I don't think they were saying that United States citizens that did that were necessarily doing something nefarious, but they were pointing to like Russia Today, RT, Sputnik, if they wrote an article or had a documentary that was critical of Hillary Clinton, that was somehow election interference, which that shows a group of people that are desperate to try to sell this narrative. That then later on, there were people who were former NSA and CIA officials pointed out that why are they, because they do this thing where they're like, we have high confidence in our assessment. If you actually like look into that, they kind of redefine the word. So like high confidence was defined in one of these documents as the assessment doesn't imply that the assessment is a fact or certainty, and such judgments might be wrong, which again, it's the same type of bullshit. So we had these former NSA and CIA guys that said, why are they relying on the circumstantial evidence? Why don't they just have the NSA trace how the hack happened? Of course, crickets, complete crickets. The DNC will not turn over their server to the FBI, or they won't let the FBI investigate the server. I don't know if they necessarily would have had to physically give it to the FBI. So they give it to this company that they pay, CrowdStrike, which is not credible. They botched a hacking report about like Ukrainian hacking before. So this is like, this is not a credible company. Plus, like, you're paying the company to deliver ultimately what you want them to say. The FBI, for some reason, just completely accepts that. And then when it came down to, like, there were these guys, this guy, Ray McGovern and Bill Binney, they were looking at the forensics of the actual leaked documents. And the forensics indicated that it was a quicker download speed than would have been capable for at least how they claimed that it happened as far as Russia hacking the DNC, and that it was most likely a leak and it was transferred onto a local drive.
Yeah, like a thumb drive or
right.
or direct hard drive plugin of some sort is what I had said, or what I had seen.
Right. So then they ask, the DNC about their internet, and of course they won't provide any answers. So, like, I guess with some of this, you have to be careful because some of the shit is circumstantial, some of it's direct evidence. But the bottom line, like, I've seen the retorts to the download speeds. I don't see people necessarily saying that McGovern and Binney are wrong about the download speed. They're just offering, what they'll do is they'll offer they'll offer a theory. They'll say, well, what could have happened is the Russians hacked, and then they took the hacked emails and put them on a drive and then gave that drive to WikiLeaks. And that's an interesting theory, but there's no evidence to support it. At least in this case, while I can't say, I have a theory of what happened, but I can't say definitively what happened. But I do believe that there is no evidence to support what the government's claiming, which is that Russia hacked the DNC. That looks like it's complete bullshit.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that they've. Well, I mean, it's not interesting that they've run with that narrative, I guess, at all. It's the only narrative that benefits their position. But yeah, that whole DNC not wanting to turn their servers over to the FBI. I mean, personally, I don't either. I would never turn my stuff over to the FBI if I had an option not to. But of course, by choosing that path, they've of course said, well, they've opened themselves up to the criticism of, well, now the whoever you hire is critiqued. But I don't, and I honestly, I don't know, like, because my freedom boner conflicts with my desire to see what the FBI forensic team would find. And of course, now it's way too late. But I mean, there's so many issues with there are so many issues with these political parties anyway, and I'm wondering what they didn't want the FBI to find.
Sure.
I think the reality is, of course, every election that gets to the presidential level has problems that are definitely illegal under federal election laws. And that's not because the campaigns are nefarious. That's because the election laws are garbage.
Right.
And they're made to catch people, obviously. But we'll never know. We'll never know. But the reality, I think you've summed it up really well, is whatever the truth is, we know that they haven't provided us evidence for the narrative that they've been running with.
Right. Exactly.
And they can't. They never will. Unless they were to get some sort of neutral third party to examine the servers and check it out. That'd be the only chance. Although I basically, and I'm not a tech guy, but what I do learn about technology from people who are tech guys is I doubt even the ability of anybody to find that information.
Sure.
Because we get this mystified idea of what you can search on tech, and I'm getting to the point where I'm not convinced they can definitively understand anything that happened.
Yeah. The other thing is I think they're kind of like taking advantage of people who don't understand how some of this shit works. Whereas like the whole thing with the Facebook ads, when they claimed that the $100,000 in Facebook ads swung the election, that at one point the goalpost was moved to that was the hacking and that was the influencing. And then when you actually look at what they're talking about, half the ads were served after the election. So I don't know how would that affect the election if they were served after. And
the ads were bipartisan. Like
right.
they had ads on both sides of many issues.
Yeah.
It wasn't definitively Trump. And actually, I don't know that they had any direct Trump ads, did they? I mean, I know they had issue ads like Second Amendment ads and stuff like that. But I don't know that they had specific candidate ads because I don't know if Facebook allowed those.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think probably the closest thing would be like Jesus arm wrestling Satan, which I guess was to advocate for conservatives, because that would be, I guess, put towards Christians. And then the Christians, I guess, would most likely be voting Republican. So they would view Jesus as the Republican Trump guy and Satan as Clinton. I don't know. But yeah, a lot of them were not about the candidates. Also, some of them were not even served. I think it's, so when you click, there's impressions and clicks, right? So some of them had 0 impressions, 0 clicks. Yeah. So how would that work? No one saw it. No one clicked on it.
Very effective advertising done right there.
Yeah. And
yeah, go ahead.
The scary thing about this is that narrative of the Facebook ads was in one of Mueller's indictments of the Russians. Mm-hmm. So that right there, like you're willing to lie in your indictment and talk about something that was, I'm not saying the whole indictment was bullshit, because apparently some of the people that were indicted were like stealing identities, and that's obviously a crime.
Right.
But some of the stuff about were like, he said that people were making, in Russia, were making Gmail accounts, and they were putting USA in the name. And I'm thinking, like, is it illegal for Russians to do that? Like, are they not allowed to put USA in the name? Like, what? I don't understand.
Why didn't Google stop this treachery?
Right. Like,
we were sold out by Google. That's what happened.
It seemed to be illegal.
On that, the indictment thing, that story dropped off for me, where they were indicting a Russian company. Mm-hmm. Then there's the last story I remember seeing was that there was furious sort of activity in a courtroom. There was an emergency hearing because they were going to unseal the name of the companies that were indicted, and they didn't, or something. Can you fill me in on what happened there? Are you familiar with that part of the story?
So it seemed like this indictment, Mueller knew that the Russians were not going to be extradited. But one of the companies actually lawyered up and I guess wanted their day in court. And there seemed to be a conflict over discovery. It seemed like Mueller wasn't prepared to provide it. And I don't know, like, I don't know, you probably would know this. I don't know, like, is it is there a certain level of gamesmanship or strategy that prosecutors are allowed where they kind of get coy with discovery, or is that like not allowed? Because it seems like Mueller has like an issue with providing discovery, and I think that's what that whole thing was about. And then they claimed that the Russians leaked the evidence online, although I could never track down the website. They deleted everything before I could even see what was in there, and they said they purposely made it sound like they didn't have good evidence, which kind of sound like, okay, yeah, okay.
Well, on the discovery issue, again, this gets into, typically a prosecutor is supposed to turn over everything that they have and intend to use, and then the stuff that they don't intend to use, they're still supposed to turn over any exculpatory evidence, no matter how minor it might be. So anything that could make you appear less than guilty that the prosecutor has, they have a duty, a requirement by law to turn that over to the defense. The problem with that's a regular criminal case. The problem gets amplified in this sort of case, again, because of that whole national security question.
Right.
Like here you have all of this evidence that you're supposedly going to use, and some of it's got to be at some level protected.
Right.
They've got to be using some sort of protected stuff, either from FBI or CIA, some sealed documents. And then suddenly the Russian company's like, okay, give it to us. And then I think that's, if I had to guess, that would be the real dilemma that Mueller would have. And so what they would have to do is the government would have to provide a neutral attorney to act on behalf of the defense and go through with the top level clearance. Mm-hmm. And that attorney would have to go through and authorize what could be released, what could not, what would be redacted, what wouldn't. I mean, the only thing I can imagine is that to get a fair shake in court, they would have to give to a Russian company protected information. I think that was maybe just a bad gamble by Mueller. It sounds like what you said is probably right, that he thought, well, they're not going to be extradited, so they're not even going to show up.
Right.
And then here they are with a lawyer that says, all right, give us the stuff, hand it over.
Right, and
Mueller.
I think it's going to go right to Putin, and that they can't release it. So, yeah, I think it's possible that I don't know, would they like drop the charges or whatever, but that's because it's certainly possible that like Russia decided, hey, go see what they have, like, you know.
Yeah, I would.
Certainly possible. Yeah,
I would do it, even if I was just a company, especially if I wasn't affiliated with the Russian government, because that information could be very valuable from a company perspective. Here's what they're able to watch about what, and if you're a private contracting company that their job is to interfere with international events, whether or not they're election related, whether or not they're even government related, but just finding out what access the government has, the government of the United States would have to snoop on your activities, that would be beneficial information that I'd want anyway. So it makes sense that they would ask for it. I think Mueller miscalculated. I think Mueller miscalculated on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
They seem to take some big gambles. We mentioned Papadopoulos. They took a big gamble on Roger Stone and Paul Manafort.
Yeah.
And of course, they got nothing that they wanted out of these guys. They got indictments for what I would call falling out of favor crimes. They're crimes that are committed by a lot of people in Washington, D.C., inner circle, but they don't get prosecuted because they're buddy with whoever's got authority.
Yeah.
No matter what party it is.
Right.
They're buddy with the bureaucracy of government. And those types of things just go until they find a reason to come after you for them. That's a risk versus reward game too.
Yeah. Yeah. I also have to wonder, like, I can't imagine that Mueller doesn't know what's real and what's not. I imagine he knows what's real. So I have to wonder, like, whether it's continuing with the case with the Russians or really any of this. Like, for example, the Russian bots and the IRA, they claim the IRA is this hacking group or whatever. Well, and this was more recent that this happened, where, you know, the Russian bots were like this kind of, you know, they blamed at one point, one of the goalposts was Russian bots influenced the election. And then it got to the point where anytime like a hashtag trended that the corporate media didn't like, they would blame it on Russian bots. But apparently there were these Democratic operatives, part of this company, New Knowledge. I don't know if you heard this, where they got caught creating Russian bots, fake Russian bots, and had them follow Roy Moore during his race with Doug Jones.
Good job.
Now, the fascinating part is like when it was covered in conservative media, they were upfront with what happened. New York Times, though, they were like, "Oh no, that was an experiment by tech experts." So they tried to downplay it. If you read the article, it's much more damning than the headline. The headline makes it seem like it was just a test of some sort. So, all right, so New Knowledge it gets caught doing this. You might have seen Rogan interviewed one of the people from New Knowledge, and so then New Knowledge is also this group that there was a Senate intel report about, Russian hackers using memes and bots and the IRA. And I'm thinking, okay, so you're telling me the Democratic operatives that were caught creating fake Russian bots are, what about this intel report? How can you trust the intel report? And then some of this shit makes it into Mueller's indictment. He's got to know what's real and what's not. I doubt Robert Mueller is like being fooled. I think he's got to be in on this. Like some of this is totally made up. Or
yeah, well, like the dossier.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who's looking at that, like you have to say, all right, I have to take my highlighter and I've got to have green, yellow, and red highlighters for this dossier.
Yeah.
And the green stuff is stuff that I think could possibly be true.
Mm-hmm.
The yellow stuff is stuff I have to question. And the red stuff is hookers peeing on Trump in a hotel in Russia. Like I have to go through and say, this can't, like, even if this is true, this is too ridiculous to be true.
Right.
So you have to go through and line that out. So you'd think he would do, I mean, if I were Mueller, that's what I would have. I would have 3 different attorneys probably go through the same dossier and give them that instruction. Tell me what's credible, tell me what's questionable, and tell me what's ridiculous. Because we've got to sort this out and find out where we go. And then you go after the green stuff first. You look at and you hope to find evidence of the yellow and red stuff as you start digging. But like trying to trace down the red. So yeah, I think you're right, because that's just how you'd have to approach it. You've got all this information. Just the dossier was pretty hefty as far from an investigative standpoint. And then you've got to go through everything else you've got. And they'd have to prioritize. And I think he did, but you're right. Having some of that stuff show up in these indictments, having some of that stuff show up in his reports, that's been very irresponsible. Yeah. But it goes to the initial problems with picking Mueller, right? Like he's not the good pick to do this investigation.
No,
not at all. I don't know who they should have picked. Maybe Avenatti could have done it.
He got what was coming to him. That was really sweet.
Oh yeah, and it's gonna get so much worse for that guy. I was reading his indictment, and that guy is. You should, if you're gonna commit all sorts of crimes, always pay your taxes. Mike. that's the first rule of criminal activity is pay your taxes, because that's the one thing they will come after you for. They'll start digging and finding out where your money's going. But
Mueller, like that's the thing. I never bought the media narrative on Mueller. It was like he was this unassailable patriot who didn't tolerate corruption, and if there was corruption, he would get to the bottom of it. And I'm like, he was the FBI director for like over a decade. There were a lot of scandals when he was the FBI director. There was like, well, first of all, he was one of the public misinformers about weapons of mass destruction. You had the NSA warrantless surveillance scandal, and that was where James Clapper committed perjury. If James Clapper was held to the same standard as Roger Stone, he would have been indicted. You had the IRS scandal. You had the AP reporters who the DOJ legally seized their communications and unmasked their sources. I think they were Associated Press reporters.
None of this happened. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. The Clinton Foundation, Pay for Play, Uranium One. He hand delivers a sample of uranium to Russia. Of course, that's nothing to see there. Of course,
was he around during Fast and Furious?
Yes. Yeah, he was around during Fast and Furious. And so I'm like, this guy, what are they talking about? Where he's unassailable? Like that's total garbage. The best scandal though, was the money laundering scandal with HBSC. I don't know if you remember this. There was like they were like doing business with drug cartels and like countries associated with terrorists, and they would take deposits from like foreign countries and funnel them into its U.S. banks, and like hundreds of billions of dollars. And so there was an investigation. They got off with a deferred prosecution agreement and paid a fine. And like on its face, I think the fine looked hefty, but it was ended up being like, I think less than 10% of what they bring in a year profit. But sure. the swampy shit about this was that like the Clinton Foundation received 81 million in donations from HSBC's group of account holders. And then you have this is just beautiful. 2 months later, HSBC appointed James Comey to its board of directors, and he left a position at a hedge fund where he was making like $7 million a year to a position that, at least according to the public financial disclosure, paid $200,000 a year.
That makes sense. That's what I would do.
Right. It's like a $6 million pay cut down to $200,000. And then apparently Comey didn't know anything at his time with HSBC when it laundered money to the Russians. There was like this money laundering scandal with the Russians with the British banking system. He must have missed all that.
He was a good note taker.
Right. He took good memos, leaked them to the press, of course. And then like the kicker with Mueller to like wrap up the how Mueller is involved in this. So he then, when he leaves the FBI, he takes a position by coincidence at the law firm Wilmer Hale, which was the law firm that represented HSBC in the scandal. Ridiculous.
Yeah, perfect. Why would anybody think that this guy was not on the level to investigate someone who was opposed to James Comey? I mean, and all of this. So of course, you know, the whole problem with all of this, in my opinion, is that Trump handled it the right way. And I mean, he may have made a few missteps along the way, but he handled it the right way. But the worst part about it is he shouldn't have had to handle it the right way.
Right. Yeah.
They put him in a position by appointing these guys to do it. Mueller, and letting him pick his team. And of course, didn't he have like two people on his team who had the exchanges of text messages that were blatantly anti-Trump and stuff like that?
Yeah, Strzok and Page. Yep.
Right. So that, you know, and that was pretty early on, but from the onset, you can see that this looks like a hack job, but Trump's hands are tied because the entire time, I mean, it'd be hard for him to fire Mueller specifically. He'd have to fire a bunch of people until he got to a guy who would fire Mueller.
Right.
As an acting director, but he didn't do that. But it really was destructive for the country that he didn't, because we've been dragging through this for 2.5 years, so long so that now the people who are entrenched in the collusion story, because I mean they've been hearing it since slightly before the election, all the way through this past week. They're not going to give it up. No. I mean, that's now ingrained in their political persona. It will always be that Trump was an illegitimate president. But what kills me about it, like this whole, just as a macro point on all of this, the idea that Russia interfered with our election should be obvious. I think all sorts of countries, now the extent of that the interference matters is
depends on the definition. Yeah, it depends on the definition.
But like the idea that any country is trying to influence a U.S. election, of course they are.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And we do the same thing,
right?
Because we have interests in foreign countries, and foreign countries have interests in us. So it takes me back to a story that I actually learned from Dan Carlin. He was talking about the election of John Kennedy, and Khrushchev. Russia lobbied hard to get Kennedy elected. And apparently at one of the first meetings of the United Nations after Kennedy's election, Kennedy goes up to shake Khrushchev's hand or whatever. Khrushchev says, congratulations and you're welcome, Mr. President. You know,
interesting.
And that was his guy. That was the guy he wanted. He didn't trust, what was he running against? Nixon? I think at the time, or something like that. He didn't trust his opponent to be as soft as Kennedy would be, and he thought he was someone he could control. And you know, no one seems to have a problem with that. But like the idea that Russian influence or any foreign power's influence in our election is new is just, it's weird. I don't know what they're doing. I think if I had to theorize on it, they're trying to bank on this wave of, I'm going to call them millennials. It's not hashtag not all millennials, but they're trying to bank on this wave of young voters who have grown up largely in peacetime. For the vast majority of their lives have grown up in peacetime. Actually, we haven't had a real major conflict since Vietnam. We haven't had a real war since Korea. And in the sense of like major powers fighting, I guess, or at risk of fighting. And they've been indoctrinated by a school system that has taught them to not really engage some of the critical thinking that's necessary to look into this stuff. So they banked on this story, and they banked on this story with the youth. Youth, of course, being mobilized against Trump because the youth are the ones who had all of these sensibilities that Trump was so offensive towards, right? Like his mean words, his mean words aren't really affecting like 55-year-old men.
Right.
That's just not the sale. But it's such a weird sort of gamble, and I think it failed. But now those people are not willing to let this go. Yeah, I don't think. But maybe I'm going to be wrong on that. I hope so.
There's also like this, like as a part of growing up, there seems to be like the first time you realize the government lied. And I think some of these people in that group haven't figured that out yet, that they eventually will. But like they're like trusting in the government because like, and certainly there are people who are not millennials that also buy this bullshit. But it just seems like, I mean, it's at least like talking like about my audience, for example, there's people in my audience that are like 50, 60 years old that like this whole thing is kind of, it might be crazy, but like they've seen corruption like this before in their lives. They're not like shocked about it. When you're younger and you experience some sort of corruption like this for the first time, you're like, oh, wow, like it's kind of, you don't expect it. So they can kind of take advantage of millennials that way, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I need to address something in the chat real quick. When I'm talking about peacetime, yes, we've been at war in Iraq and Afghanistan for a very long time. I'm talking about the difference in scale of war between Iraq and Afghanistan and Vietnam, Korea, World War II, World War I, like the generation of wars between major powers. That was like, there was a war between major powers every generation up until World War II. And then they've largely, once the Cold War ended, really have stopped. I mean, when we're talking through Korea, Vietnam, and the Cold War that followed, we were on a push button to global destruction timer. That we came very close to exchanging nuclear weapons with a major power. We haven't had that. We haven't had anything like that since the wall came down. And that's a remarkable part of world history. Like, we have not had a period this long without major wars between major powers. Maybe ever going back through history. It's crazy to think about what kind of peace we've really been living in. Because yes, we have had war with Iraq and Afghanistan, but that war, at first, the U.S. populace was largely involved in it, and then it tapered off and just kind of festered in silence for the next 10 years. If you're outside of a military family, you're not hearing about the war. You're not seeing the effects of it. But in World War II and Korea and Vietnam, you're hearing about it every day. The countries having to give up on things. In World War II, you have rationing. In Cold War, you have air raid drills going on, in public schools. We're talking vastly different types of conflicts that have been fought. And this is the first generation history that's grown up really without it. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not trying to downplay the fact that we have been at war. Don't get me wrong. I'm trying to delineate between the scope, because it's very, very different. That being said, yeah, man, I think you're spot on. with this stuff. I really have enjoyed hearing some of your takes on it, because I haven't been able to follow it. There's so much to follow.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sure we could talk a whole bunch about it. But what I want to do, if you're willing to hang around for a bit,
sure.
I've got a bunch of chats, and some of them are questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm gonna start burning through those.
Sure.
Evan Lacey says, "Hey Nick, could you elaborate on the James Field case?" Yes, but not right now. I still cannot fathom how the jury wasn't moved out of Charlottesville. Keep up the good work. I will talk more about James Fields later, but I want to take advantage of our guest while he's here. Asia Frazier said, should have called Ron Miss Beta. It shouldn't have called Ron Mrs. Beta. It's Madam Beta to you. That's the Vic Mignogna stuff.
Okay.
It's just been cracking me up. John Sislowski says Stormy Daniels and her VD has followed Hard Bastard here.
Yes, Stormy Daniels is a regular viewer, and she unleashes her crabs on the chat often. So yes, thank you, Stormy.
That's very terrifying. Hey, did you see her statement about Avenatti?
Yeah, briefly. I don't recall a lot of it. Just basically, like, she's almost, wasn't it like almost like an "I told you so"? Like, I kind of saw this happening, or some kind of bullshit like that.
Yeah, well, like a month or right after she lost her case to Trump.
Yes.
She basically came out and said, actually, I never even authorized him to move forward with this case. That was a really weird statement to come out.
That's very weird. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was asking where the GoFundMe money was, because something like 450 grand had been raised for GoFundMe, and it all went through Avenatti, and she's like, where'd the money go? So that was a big problem. Well, then just the other day when he got picked up, she came out and said, I had fired Avenatti a month ago, and had I known what I know now about him, I would have never hired him. And then she said, please respect my privacy, but more information is coming. I think the feds flipped Stormy.
Oh yes.
And he's going to have another, because they've got his ex-wife, they've got an ex-client. And if they've got another client that he defrauded out of, $400,000 of money and ended up breaching his ethical duties and filing suit on her behalf without her, ooh my gosh, that's going to be forgery. That's going to be perjury. That's going to be a really bad situation for him. He's done.
I hope people don't forget what it was like every night with him. I hope people never forget that. I hope people never forget any of this shit with the corporate media. I hope they never let them live it down, because these people, at least with Avenatti, he's the first person to kind of get some sort of just desserts. Yeah. And I mean, he tried to put himself front and center on Kavanaugh with his mystery thing, which may or may not have been a result of a 4chan troll. I really hope that story is true. Yeah, that would be great if that was true. I have no idea. I would hope that's the case.
Yorgamundo 7 says late, muted, and wait. Oh crap, he did it, guys. He did it. I'm always late, but today I was on time. Takaki Onsai, this one's for you. Hard Bastard. Anti-SJW, excellent. You'll fit in just fine. ZZ Toluca says, only on April Fool's Day would you be on time. Chronoflation, regarding SJW stuff, if words are violence and SJWs insult my girl, does that make knocking their lights out self-defense? What do you think?
Well, they would argue, I would obviously say violence in exchange for words is unacceptable, but they argue that, like, there are certain words like Antifa, if a person has the wrong thoughts, that violence is the answer, because the Holocaust happened. That's basically their argument, that we want to avoid the Holocaust happening again, so it's okay to beat people that we disagree with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a common theme with them. That well, we don't want violence, but some positions and some things people say are just too dangerous.
Right. That's exactly what they argue.
Alexandra says, happy April Fool's Day to you and me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Coop says, Google won't let me donate on my Shane's Chair account anymore. That's okay. It was mainly for the 24-hour stream. Had a lot of fun doing so. Thank you, Coop. Cami4242 says, PewDiePie is back on top. Don't let faceless corporations rule YouTube. Long live the king. Subscribe to PewDiePie. Yeah, I think, what was it? T-Series or whatever lost something like 200,000 accounts in a bot account purge today.
Oh, good.
But PewDiePie didn't lose as many. So good
Excellent.
job. Matt Field says, hide the cannolis, Nick. Hard Bastard is a greasy wop. Yes,
that is correct. He's accurate. Matt Fields, he's a regular viewer. He knows.
Well, are cannolis good? Do you eat cannoli a lot?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Cannolis are great.
I don't know that I've had too many. There's not really good Italian food anywhere near me.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah.
I don't think Italians like the cold.
Yeah, you would be right. You would be right.
Julian Jack says, "Hey, Rackets Esquire, I've been watching you since you had 500 subs. Thought it's time to donate. Oh, thank you, buddy. Please read the decision by Benitez on the California magazine ban. It's straight fire, and Rex our DA. Much love." Oh, that sounds good. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
The California had a high capacity magazine ban, so you could only have 10 rounds in a rifle magazine.
Briefly, someone mentioned it earlier, but they didn't really go into detail. But it was like a win for the Second Amendment folks.
Yeah, they on summary judgment. So there's no jury or anything, no long trial, just on the facts of the pleadings. The judge said this law is unconstitutional. Boom, you're out. Can never be enforced. Permanently enjoined from enforcement. So that's great. I do need to read it. I've just read sort of the summary. Caleb Cooney says the cork in my bottle of Nadura fell in the bottle. I will cry later. For now, here's $5 for the whiskey fund. Always sad. Do you drink?
Yes, not like all the time, but I do like scotch and whiskey and whatnot.
What's your scotch recommendation?
I don't really.
Or what's your go-to?
Right now, I'm drinking. What is it? Monkey
Shoulder?
Yeah. It's not bad.
Yeah, I got to try it the other day for the first time, and I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I had this Lahaina rum from Hawaii, and my wife poured a little bit of it and didn't finish it, so I finished that off for her. But it tastes kind of like Christmas spices. Not a huge fan. It's really powerful. I think you got to mix it with something.
Sure.
But I don't mix alcohol. I just
not like straight. Yeah, like straight ups. Yeah.
I'm gonna follow that up with some Talisker. My go-to right now, my favorite current bottle is this Glenlivet Nadura with the peated cask finish. This is great stuff.
I'll combine, like, if the time I'll combine alcohol is if I'm in like a setting where there's like free alcohol and I want to get obliterated. I will do the Long Island iced teas, but that's just more like if you're trying to.
That's just efficiency.
Right? Exactly, efficiency. Exactly.
Those will they'll put you down as fast as you can put them down.
Great, yeah, fantastic.
Let's see. Shanksy Beast says, "I'm using my free super chat for you, Rekieta Kun. Thank you." Scott Severin says, "I'm a little late. Can you start all the way over?" Francis Lancer says, "Hi, hard bastard. Hi, chat. Any collusion?" So, in your opinion, like, no, off the record, just between you and me, is there any collusion between Trump and Russia, or the Trump campaign and Russia?
No, none.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
They provided evidence for it. If anyone, I've said it from day one, if anyone can provide evidence for any of this, I will go on YouTube and I will do a live stream and I'll say, guys, look at this, unbelievable, and then we'll go over it. But so far, nothing.
Do you find a difference between the right and the left unwillingness to do that?
The left is way more unwilling. You know, you could probably argue in the early 2000s, the right was more unwilling, but now the left is, you can't, there's no conversations to be had. It's like one of the reasons that I like to see people having conversations regardless of whether I'm interested in it or not, regardless if I have a position. Just like the free exchange of ideas is like very limited now, particularly the left. They have no tolerance for it. So it's I think coming more from the left now. That might change eventually, but for now, I think it's more from the left.
Yeah, is that related to power? Do you think, or is there something more complicated there?
Yeah, you know what I think it is? I think it's like, okay, so the gay marriage debate was a big win for the left. Now, I'm not saying that like that means that the people that were opposed to it were wrong or whatever. I'm saying that like societally or in society, you kind of had, it was just a shift. It was a major shift. It was legalized. And it seemed like from that point on, they were like, you know what? They almost like they didn't.
Uh-oh. I lost you for a second there, bud. We may have lost the guest while he hopefully comes back from Robot and Silence World. Hopefully Hillary didn't get to him. I'll read a couple more chats that aren't related to him, and if he is able to come back, then I will gladly go back to ones that are for him. Mithra and Emrys says, if 1 in 5 were true, U.S. college campuses would be more dangerous than the Congo, where rape is used as a weapon of war. Yes, that's the often cited statistic that 1 in 5 women are raped. Abazanoff says, how do I send you a gift? How do I send you a gift? Down in the description, there's a P.O. box. P.O. box listed down in the description. Any gifts can be sent to that P.O. box. Otherwise, if that doesn't work, private message or email me, and I can give you an alternative place. Some places won't deliver to a P.O. box. You know, so I do have an alternative address, but I don't like to give it out publicly. I will give it out in private. Andrew Thorsten says, first, that Kick Vic guy and now Hard Bastard. I love finding new channels. Siren Jag says, I, Nick Rekieta, hereby announce that I will be starring in the title role of the remake of Flesh Gordon, set for 2020 release. I could not be more excited. Trailer coming soon. I said soon. Well, and coming often. Secret Squirrel Tech, thank you for the donations. Ralph Griswold, thank you for the donations. Weirdo with a Cello says, do you think more of #KickVic were watching the 24-hour than usual looking for dirt? I hope so, because we really didn't talk about Vic hardly at all during it, and that would make me really happy if they wasted an entire day watching me just goof around and have fun. Mithran Emrys says, the Amish and the Mennonites practice shunning, if I recall. Read that one earlier. Automata said, Pope Hat did an episode that covered JW's Jehovah's Witness falsely considered Nazi sympathizers around World War II due to refusal to salute the flag, including physical assaults. 100% the original Punch a Nazi with huge flaws. There you go. Asia Fraser says, raised Christian and still am. Mom taught me to question and research to find substance for faith and understand teachings and decide for myself, not just listen and believe. And it sounds like your mother was very, very wise. Waifu Sans Frontiers. The only religion suited for the modern era is the imperial cult. The God Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, has already ruled on the issue of AI, genetic modification, and mind control. Burn the heretics of MK Ultra, Facebook, and Google. I'm going to check and see if he has sent me. His internet could have just completely died. I have no idea.
Let me try this one.
Oh, hey, I got you back.
Yeah, that's weird. The mic cut out, but I think we're good now.
Okay, I was just saying, I just sent you a DM. You can ignore it.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, we're good.
So you could hear me the whole time?
Yeah. Yeah, It's weird. It's like Hangouts sometimes will like drop the mic and I gotta like unplug it and plug it in, but I think we're good.
I'm glad I didn't make fun of you then. That would have been really embarrassing.
Well, did it end at like a certain, like, because I was talking about Desmond. I don't know if it ended at like a funny spot. I just basically was pointing out that that's crazy. The ideas that the left have now that they're trying to almost force people to go along with are insane.
Yeah, I lost you right after I asked if it was power-based or something more complicated, and you just started talking, then it just cut out.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So basically what I said is I think that it is power-based, and you could probably at least look at when the gay marriage debate happened, it was a big win for the left, even though, like, I'm not saying that the people who were opposed to it were wrong. I'm just saying that, like, societally, it was a big deal. And it seemed like after that, they took advantage of like the kind of low amount of conservatives, particularly like professors at colleges. And there were no more like debates. It was just kind of like, you will agree with us or you're a racist and a bigot. And it seems like they're not interested in discussing things. Now that, I guess it's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but like, at least if you have good ideas, that's one thing. But they don't have good ideas. They have crazy ideas, like that kids should be able to transition. And you got Desmond is amazing, who is at this like nightclub performing, and like no one's really shouting down this group of people with horrible ideas.
Yeah, it's very. I can't. That whole kid transitioning thing, and that bothers me a lot. Like
it's crazy.
What happened to the whole, like, the reality that kids don't understand? I don't even know that a kid understands identity. Like,
right.
if you ask a kid, what are you? They'll just tell you their name. Like,
right.
And that lasts for a very, very long time. Like the conceptualizing an identity, or a core set of things that make up who you are is very, very abstract thinking. And it's beyond a lot of children. It's beyond all children.
Sure.
And there's some point in development where you start to get into the ability to self-conceptualize in that way, as opposed to, I am physically here. My parents call me this. People see me in this way. To I am something different on the inside. That's so high level. And like what the problem I have with kid transitioning is that you take these kids, even teenagers, at the points in their life where they're least certain about who they are, and they're struggling to find where they fit in and what their purpose is, at a point where they're not given purpose. Historically, kids used to be working and would have been working for a very long time by the time they hit, 15, 16 years old. Now, by the time they're 15, 16 years old, they might just be entering a job force, which puts them into a different social circle than what they've been in their entire lives in the school system. And suddenly, like, their identity is going to be challenged. They're being exposed to more and more media as they get older and get more and more access to it, either through their parents or through society, which stops you until you're 18 from consuming certain content without parental permission. So they're learning about all this stuff. They're still confused about who they are. They haven't even really developed the ability to cognate about it. And yet we're telling them that they can determine that they're not supposed to be the gender that they were born.
Right.
That is shockingly irresponsible, in my opinion.
And some of it's now getting enforced through the state. Depends on the country. I think the UK is worse right now than America. But like some states, if you, or I think it was in Canada, right? I think it was Canada, where like if the parents oppose transition for the child, that the state could take the child. Like insanity.
That's we need, that's one thing that for me is one of the biggest problems I have. When the state has determined that they can take a child from a parent, we have to be damn certain that they are right. Like, for me, that should be the absolute last thing. Look, I get that there are bad parents out there, but the state is a worse parent than just about anybody. The only thing the state should be interfering in my opinion, is will the child be dead?
Right.
If the state doesn't intervene. Because other than that, I mean, putting them into a foster system, even with bad parents, it's hard to justify the foster system and the amount of trauma that goes into kids who go through it. I know there are success stories, but man, so the idea that they would take them over a medical decision, especially a non-life threatening medical decision, that's insane. That's wild.
Yep, that's the slippery slope. That's like I said, I give the conservatives credit for the slippery slope argument. We might not have agreed at where the slope started, but I can't deny that they were right about that.
Yeah, we don't have to agree where the slope started, but we're all on skis now.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Dirk Lamont says, women do not have Y chromosomes. I'm sure that the modern left would generally disagree with basic biology now, though.
Yeah.
Kawaii Potato says, off topic, but apparently T-Series has sent a cease and desist to PewDiePie claiming defamation. How ridiculous is this claim? Exactly. Absurdly ridiculous. You're in America, Jack. When you're operating on YouTube, you're operating in the US, and you're not in India, and there is no, you can take that defamation claim and you can eat it for all I care. And you can, here, I'll make my anti-India joke. You can shit it out in the streets.
Right. Street shitting.
Plum Logan says, hey, hard bastard, really glad to see you here.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Jesse Wood says, hey, Nick, been watching for a while. Love your content. Ever want to talk to someone who believes the earth is flat? Hit me up. Oh, that would be interesting. Have you, do you follow the flat earth rounders stuff?
A little bit. I had a debate a while ago on my channel. I moderated it. It was with a flat earth guy and two round earth guys. It was very entertaining. The guy that's the viewer that did the debate, he's very entertaining. And like, I don't agree with the vast majority of his belief system, but like he'll call in a lot and just, you know, we have conversations about like wild shit. And I just think I enjoy it. I think it's like healthy. Like the flat earth is a great example. Like the idea that they would be censoring that, it's just crazy. Why would you censor that? That's just so ridiculous. They act like these people are dangerous. They do the same thing with like Q, although I'm not going to put flat earth and Q in the same category, but, you know, they act like the Q people are dangerous, and it's just, I think it's just an attempt to control people and try to eliminate as much dissent as possible.
Yeah, and that's it's always interesting because the flat Earth discussion, whether you take it as a meme or you take it as truth, either way, is an important one because the overwhelming majority of people couldn't come close to proving the Earth is round. Mm-hmm. Like actually, the majority of people can't prove that we breathe. Like they've been told, and it doesn't mean that we don't breathe, and it doesn't mean that the Earth is flat. But it's a useful endeavor to go and look at some of these debates and say, what do I know? What can I do, and how much do I rely on faith? And to me, that's the core of all of this stuff is so many people, and it's necessary at our level of information. And if you think about the advancement of society as a whole, we had to start taking the knowledge of our previous generations on faith and then building on that, because we don't have time for every single person to be able to prove every single thing we believe about reality. Right. And so that's something that's it's a neat exercise to me, and I don't care what the subject is, but I love entertaining discussion. And I do like being challenged on all of this stuff. And flat Earth, sometimes my guilty pleasure is the original flat Earth versus sphere Earth debate group on Facebook, and going in and trying to figure out who's trolling and who's serious.
Sure. You know, it's interesting the point you're making about like, you have to, at least in a healthy society, have to have like trust basically in the institutions. That's one of the, I think, major fallouts of the way the media is right now. This is doing irreparable damage to, I think, our society with how much distrust is in the media. Like, I think distrust is healthy, but we're in a position where almost everything they report politically is bullshit. That's not a healthy thing at all. And there's going to be, I think, a lot of repercussions.
Right. And I think that's part of what is so interesting to me, is that we have these phenomena rising up, like flat Earth, like major conspiracy theories, like my personal theory that India is actually fake anyway. It was invented by 4chan because India is far too funny and the memes are all real. So that can't actually exist, because if it does, then the Earth is funnier than it should be. So, but we have these conspiracy theories, or these massive disconnects from the reality that everybody else has, gaining traction in a place where we would expect them to lose traction, because distrust in institutional responsibility is so high. Yeah, that we don't trust universities. We don't trust major media. We don't trust organizations that are affiliated with government. We don't trust NASA. NASA's out here talking about like global warming and improving Muslim relationships and stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, what business is it of NASA? Like, lasso me an asteroid and bring it into mining range. That's all I care about for you. Yeah. I don't care about the Middle East and global warming's impact on Middle Eastern relations coming from a NASA report. And so we have this large well of distrust. And that's what's so fascinating about all this stuff, is people are taking things that we thought we had rooted in. Vaccines. I mean, heck, vaccines and the rise of this anti-vaccine movement, the rise of Eastern and holistic medicine, as opposed to Western medicine, which, like, we can credit Western medicine with a degree of longevity that Eastern medicine cannot possibly compare to. And we have people genuinely saying, no, Eastern medicine is the right way to do it. And it's like, well, maybe as a supplemental tool for well-being, but overall health, I mean, Western medicine has increased life expectancy by leaps and bounds above anything we had before. But we have people suggesting that these old ways are better. And it's the distrust in the institutions. It's fascinating to me. Fascinating. Next is Asia Frazier says, if orange is the new black, does that make Trump black? Oh, great. Trump is now blackface president. Sorry, Mr. Trump. You'll never live it down. Hikari Blue says, we need the gay frogs back. We do. Go to Flint. Randy T says, I remember when they suspended my incels.me site. Wait, what? You had an incels.me site? Was that after the Elliot Rodgers shooting that they suspended it?
I don't remember. Randy is a viewer, and like basically when I don't even remember when this started, but they started to claim that incels. This was just like the next group of people that they picked on and blamed for all of society's ills. So they were claiming that all these terrorist attacks and shootings were happening because of incels, and he was one of the websites that the corporate media did hit pieces on and acted as if like they were somehow responsible for people committing murder because they had a forum where they, shared their opinion about women, and the media didn't like it. It was ridiculous.
Well, of course. The media doesn't like anything outside of what they consider to be normative right now.
Right.
If you're not normative now to their version of normative,
sure,
then you're not even worth living. Andrew War Snowboard says, on time and homosexual. Deleted or heterosexual. No, on time and heterosexual. I've defeated the gay by being on time. Deleted account says, history of banking, the Money Masters, 1996 documentary. Angry Kitten says, the good idea fairy attacks again. Kaltenbach says, those who trade their freedom for security lose both and deserve neither. Ben Franklin. Altira Mungara says, I have long held that the reason Trump won was that he was the first one to publicly say all the things that we were told we couldn't say. What do you think on that theory?
Yeah, I certainly, I mean, like when I first started out, I was kind of uncomfortable with Trump. I didn't necessarily like him. But then, when you see things like saying directly to Jim Acosta's face, you are fake news, when he does stuff like that, I'm like, this is awesome. Like, how do you not love this? Because it's like, I think people see the most powerful men, arguably in the world, at least in the country, doing things and advocating for things that they want. And like, that's just not usual in the country politically. And so I totally get that.
Yeah, that's one thing that I have appreciated from Trump. And we see it. We see less and less power over language. I mean, there was a time where it looked like we were going to have, 1984.
Yeah.
Double plus ungood think or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like that was coming. Implemented willingly by society as opposed to from government, which no one saw coming.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, someone was like, leaks audio of Trump saying, grab him by the pussy.
Yeah.
And they demand the apology and the groveling so that he could go die in a hole, because that was the plan. And he just said, nah.
Locker room talk.
Yep.
Which it was. I loved the media coverage of that when they're like, that's not a locker room I've ever been in. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, of course.
What are you talking about? What locker room do you go into?
You said it last week, you liar.
It's like crazy.
Yeah, and man, that Billy Burke or whatever, who he said it to.
Billy Bush,
Billy Bush. I always say Billy Burke. Billy Bush, he like tried to distance himself from it. It's like, no. The funny thing is Trump is saying that to a guy who absolutely knows exactly what Trump is talking about.
Yeah.
He exposed what their life was. I mean, that's the best part. Like these people who are wealthy, out there in public, journalists, a lot of journalists, men are particularly handsome in some way, unless they're on Fox. I've noticed that Fox tends to have like some gnarly looking dudes like O'Reilly and Hannity.
The women are hot though. They're very good in the women.
The Fox women are very attractive. Fox men are not. Like Brett Baer, that guy's eyes can see both sides of the earth at the same time. I don't trust any of them. But no, I mean you've got guys like Matt Lauer getting Me Too'd, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And there's reasons. They're powerful, they're influential, and many of them are passably handsome, and that's all you need to be to have lots of power. And Trump exposed that for everybody. I think that maybe is what pissed him off.
Yeah.
The most. But But yeah, I love that he came out and he just said it and never once apologized. I don't even care that he said stuff that that pissed me off eventually. I was just like, thank you for not saying you're sorry for it and not walking back your statements.
Yeah, you know, actually the earliest, I think this was the earliest time where I saw that and I was impressed by it. It was the debate where Megyn Kelly tried to checkmate him and said, "You've called women pigs," and blah, blah, blah. And he responded, "Only Rosie O'Donnell." Because while she was doing that list, so I'm watching that, and while she's going down that list, I'm thinking, how the fuck is he going to get out of this? She is like trying to own him in front of everybody, and just smooth as hell. Only Rosie O'Donnell. The audience laughed, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I like this. This is definitely a rebellion against the establishment bullshit." So that was great.
Yeah, and you should call Rosie a fat pig.
Yeah, she's horrible.
And ignoring, of course, the fact that Obama called Sarah Palin a pig in his own way, you know, lipstick on a pig.
Right.
And had Trump used the exact same phrase in the exact same context, he would have been excoriated for it.
Yeah.
So that's just how it goes. But yeah, that never apologizing, it has taken away the power of the mob, and we're starting to see it be less and less effective. It didn't work on Kavanaugh, largely because of Trump.
I think that was huge. I was very nervous that was going to work. I thought that was I thought when the Kavanaugh hearings happened, there was a time where, like, people who watch the stream might remember this, but there was a period of time where I was just nervous that they were going to get their way. It would have been such a horrible precedent to set. And Trump came out and did like a 2-hour press conference where he took the media on one-on-one. And I thought, you know what, that might be like him setting the tone as the leader, because what happened after that is you had Kavanaugh did basically the same thing, took on Congress and was like, this is ridiculous. And then you had Lindsey Graham, who I don't necessarily like, but at least at the time had a very strong, kind of similar, I think Trump kind of set the tone. And I think that press conference, I think that delivered the win that people realized, all right, well, if the president is fighting against these people, we're going to do the same thing. I think that was a huge moment in this kind of culture war.
Yeah. And I think that, Lindsey Graham, who I normally just really can't stand, but
yeah,
he did have that standout moment at the hearing, especially where he just lit him up, and it just shone. It was a spotlight on how ridiculous this was.
Yeah,
like, what are we even doing here? We're going through comments about farting in a high school yearbook. Like, that's where we're going with his Supreme Court justice nomination. We're gonna hang our hats on this guy not being qualified because and when he was 18, he liked a fart joke.
Right.
Oh my God.
It's ridiculous.
That's great. Pop Vulture Inc. says, "Is this an SJW show?" Well, it depends on what you believe SJW is, man. Party Time 1000 says, "First the blackface and now killing coons in your shed. Raccoons, raccoons." Nick, what's going on, big guy? Hey, it was several years ago. Now I own a gun and I just shoot them.
You've grown a lot.
Yeah. I got those pest control rounds for my 45. It's basically like a little shotgun round. It like blows the fur right off them. It's kind of awkward. I'd rather just put a real round through them. I'd feel better about it. Helios Regalia says, "I'm with you, man. In Wisconsin, had to walk home a mile in that cold." Oh, buddy, that's too far of a walk. That's too far of a walk for that. Timothy Reaper says, "My grandfather once chased a skunk off his porch with a can of Lysol." Attaboy. I caught a skunk in a live trap. That was the worst.
How did you get rid of it? Did it try to spray? I would imagine that would happen.
It tried to. So here's what I had to do. The worst part about this. So I was trying to catch a stray cat that was fighting with one of my other cats. My goal was to catch this cat because it was a monster. It was a big, beefy cat. And I thought, if I can catch this cat and keep it around my cats and get it domesticated, I wouldn't mind having it around because it'll kill raccoons. Sure. And so I was going to catch this cat in a live trap. Well, I shine my flashlight on the live trap, and it's a skunk. And the bad part is I had to drive to Texas from Minnesota that day.
Jeez.
So I walked up very carefully, and I clipped a leash, like one of those yard wire leashes to this thing. So it's like 15, 20 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
And then I drug the skunk across the yard to a pond and slowly walked kind of back and forth. And the cage kind of went into the pond, and I had to drown the skunk.
Yeah, I kind of do that to people in Red Dead Redemption too. I think I understand exactly. I have the mental image. It's weird how there is a parallel there.
Yeah, and so I drag it in, and I felt really bad because like the pond was flooded, so it wasn't deep. It was way out past the border of the pond normally. It wasn't deep, so like I could still see the top of the cage and a little skunk paw doing this, and then it stops. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I pull the cage out, and I'm about to get the skunk out of it and throw the corpse off in the woods so it doesn't stink up the whole yard. And it comes back. It like starts breathing again. So I take the cage and I throw it back in the water, and I left it there for like, 30 minutes. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but if you shoot a skunk, it will spray like crazy, way worse than anything you've ever seen. So there's nothing you can do with it.
Jeez.
Drowning was the most humane way to take care of it. Otherwise, you have to starve them. It's terrible.
So, yeah, you can't have them spraying. That shit is just the worst.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so the skunk made basically skunk tea out of my pond. And then right before we left, I pulled it out. It had been gone for a while then, and got rid of the body. But that's just that was just a shame. That was a shame. But I knew I couldn't shoot it because I did have a skunk go in one of our window wells the prior year, and I shot that thing, and it sprayed, and the room that was attached to that window was not usable for something like 6 months.
Wow.
Because it was so brutal. So drown your skunks, y'all. It's the only way to do it. Next. Also live in the country. It's fun how many things you have to kill. Altira Mungara says, I really wish the investigation had started a real conversation about the Russian disinformation campaign instead of a bunch of political squabbling. Do you have any comments about that?
I don't know, like, what she would be defining as the Russian disinformation campaign. Like, certainly, like, the idea that Russia tries to influence other countries' elections, I'll buy that. I just don't know, like, specifically. I think it just comes down to definitions. Like what the government has said is the disinformation. It to me, it seems like, at least so far, some of it has been Democratic operatives from new knowledge. So I would have to, I guess it would have to be specifically like what they would be referring to. But I mean, I do think governments spy on other governments, and certainly that's a conversation. And I think probably her broader point is that this has destroyed any sort of serious conversation about actual espionage that other countries are absolutely engaging in. And it's just turned it into a circus at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. And to the chat, if you think you've got a skunk in a live trap and you're going to release it into the wild, have fun with that. You get within a foot of that cage and see how it works out for you when you have to release the metal trap door, which makes a very loud sound right next to a thing that will spray you with a horrifically disgusting toxic chemical.
I get that.
You just like I said, I didn't want to catch a skunk in a live trap because you don't want to kill the skunk. But there's no way you're releasing that thing into the wild. It's just mechanically not going to happen unless you're going to get sprayed. Maybe I guess I could have hired someone to come do it. That wasn't happening. Don't worry, plenty more skunks where that one came from. Coop says the media nowadays is just a multi-billion-dollar corporations. If the media was actually media/reporters, okay, but the corporate media isn't about free press. I think that's accurate.
Yeah, definitely.
Why did you pick that trap then? I was trying to catch a cat. Sergei Vasilov says, who is insane enough to go to war with Russia? Her. Yeah, Hillary was talking.
Yeah.
We were on the road to war.
Yeah.
Trump doesn't get enough credit for that either. I mean, we were on the path to war with Russia and North Korea under Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Tess not on holiday says, talking about Clinton, I hear the best way to reach her is through email. Ooh.
Yes, probably.
The Big Red Bear says, as someone on the left, I've got to say the Democrats need to lose. They're a bizarre combination of elites, tech giants, and racist ideologues. They care nothing for workers or the poor. We have the same problem in Canada.
Ooh, that's rough.
An unnamed source says coat hanger babies matter. Ouch. Steven Alvarez says, I made myself extreme anti-abortion by accident. I can't say I am okay with the mother killing her son or daughter because she can't afford him or her. They are a cousin, nephew, or a niece. There you go. Ear Juice says, we have new white pride meetup group. I hope you can join and give us all similar haircuts. Thank you. You know, it's not fair. It's not fair that Spencer ruined the fade. I've just got to say that. Screw you, Spencer. Ruining the fade. Silva says, Neil Schusterman book Unwind is about a United States whose parents can abort their children from 13 to 18 and have organs harvested, not death, since all the parts live on. That's depressing.
Yikes. That's probably 10 years, the Democratic platform.
They do seem to just be going harder and harder on everything, right?
Yeah. Yep.
It's like, well, we can kill them as long as we download them first.
Right. Something. I mean, it's insane. They have to be like this. You can't have a functional society if you're not protecting your children.
TLJ Screwjob says, half of my friends from elementary to high school was a Jehovah's Witness. No, 1 out of 2. Sorry, not half of my friends.
Okay.
Message 1 out of 2. One of my friends from elementary to high school was a Jehovah's Witness, and every year when the teacher said, why aren't you standing for the pledge? He'd say, because of my religion. Not being a jerk about it, but just stating why. And then 2 out of 2, another person in our friend group would always say that he should at least stand for the pledge, not recite it or put his hand on his heart, just stand, because people fighting and dying for future generations and all that. Thoughts? Here's my thoughts. This is America, Jack. If you don't want to stand for something, you don't have to stand for something. And no state or school should, or state-run school especially, should be able to make you do it.
Yeah, I mean, this was an area that they fought and won in court. Okay, so me personally, I used to not be able to salute the flag, and now JWs, it's different. Like sometimes you can stand as long as you don't put your hand over your heart. Some people choose to sit. But what's interesting is my attitude about the Pledge of Allegiance changed when, because when people would kind of be like almost dogmatic about it, like you must do it, my natural reaction was like, no, I'm not going to do it. But then as society has changed and it's almost become like, at least they claim it's like racist to be patriotic. And then once that happened, it's like kind of like they're trying to take it away from you. And then you look at it again, you're like, wait, what? You're taking it away. And then it kind of changes your perspective, and then you appreciate it more.
Yeah, I think so. And here's to the people who think that forcing someone to stand up is beneficial when it comes from the state. It's not. I don't know how else to tell you. Do I stand up for the pledge? Absolutely. I stand up for the pledge, stand up for the national anthem, hand on the heart and all that stuff. Very much. And I very much believe that. My kids do. I force my kids to. I teach them to respect our country and the people who have fought for it. But here's the thing. The state shouldn't do that. The state is not in a position to do that, in my opinion. It's up to us to tell people to do that, and it's up to those people to be convinced. That's it. The state shouldn't be doing any of this stuff. Why are we abdicating our responsibilities of patriotism to the state? Patriotism enforced by state isn't patriotism. Just like charity enforced by the state isn't charity. That none of that is true. It's our duties to do this stuff, not the state. Not to let the state do it for us. That's the wrong perspective, in my opinion. But you're free to disagree. Knight of Hopex says, I began to exist when the ovum was inseminated. Well, there you go. I tend to go with implantation, although, you know, there's no real easy way to detect the difference between conception and implantation, but that's me. Mr. Archer says, I don't agree with the abortion/deadbeat dads, but as a matter of equal protection, we should at least have a legal out for men, sign a paper, zero support. Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. How do you deal with that issue? And that's the problem with it. There isn't equal protection. So if men don't get a say in abortion, then men can't be held responsible for a baby, right?
Yeah.
Like that makes sense. That's the only logical way you can do it, is you can either give men the power to kill the baby, or you can give men the power to remove themselves from the situation. Because the mom has the power to remove herself from the situation and not give the man even an opportunity to have his own child. And that's crazy to think about. It's crazy that we would do that, you know?
Yeah.
But Zakin Tawate says, what's your over under on Noor going to jail for that police shooting? I have no idea. Noor, is that the Muslim guy who shot the woman in Minneapolis? I'm not familiar with the name. Noor police shooting. Oh, Muhammad Noor. Yeah, that's he shot the. Did you see that? That was in.
No.
Here in the Twin Cities, it was probably I think it was 2017. Yeah, July 15th, 2017. The two cops in one car were responding to a call, and a woman came up to the door of the driver's side, and the passenger side cop is Muhammad Noor, who's a Muslim. And
she pregnant?
I don't know if she was pregnant or not, but he fires across his partner. He draws and fires right in front of him and shoots her through the driver's side window. And she was actually, you know, like, I think the person who even called the police, and she was coming to tell them what was going on. And he
sounds familiar. The story does sound familiar.
Yeah, he has a problematic history, we'll say, with some excessive force complaints from other women and stuff. So there's real questions. Will he go to jail? Man, I hope so. I personally want to see more cops who shoot citizens, especially unjustifiably. I want to see them punished in some way. I've got a problem sending cops to jail because I know that's not a good place to be a cop. But at the same time, don't be killing people. How about that? How about we just don't kill people?
Yeah, it's a good policy.
If you don't, it should be so limited. Just like a normal human, our ability to fire on another person and kill them is so limited. Cops seem to get a little more deference on that. And I mean, I'm sorry, but if you make the wrong decision, especially a case like this, because there's no gun, there's very little, if any, danger. They're not responding to a dangerous call. I don't think it was. Oh man, and I don't have time to look at it, but it was crazy. Over under on him going to jail. I hope he does. That one seems pretty clear cut. But I thought the guy who shot Philando was going to go to jail too. But who knows? Sakaki Onsai says Schiff and others are running scared. It's about to come out, and folks like Andrew Weissman, John Brennan, and Sally Yates are about to get WTF pwned. Do you have any comments on that statement?
I hope so. There are like different. There's like the Q folks, then there's like the Huber folks, which we all want the same thing, justice. And so I'm generally pessimistic about people in power receiving justice, but I hope he's right. I hope he's right, and I hope that they bring the justice whoever was involved in this.
Yeah, there you go. I agree with that. Seamus Mulane, thank you for the donation. And then he follows up with, read up on Project Birmingham if you think they actually care about election manipulation. I'm not familiar. Are you familiar with that?
No, never heard of that.
Well, I'll have to check it out. An unnamed source says, thoughts on the MSN blackout of the lizard style. I have no idea what he's talking about. All right,
so the lizard style, I believe, is the reference to the song I play in the intro. So I believe that would be the reference. So yeah, the media is, I mean, first of all, the channel would have to be way larger for them to even do anything. He's obviously joking, but I do think at some point, if the channel grows, I think if channels grow large enough, you run the risk of a hit piece, which you kind of look forward to. The way the media is so ridiculous with the way that they claim, like, for example, if you have a Patreon account, this was Joy Reid, that if you have a Patreon account and you are talking about things that they didn't agree with, that you're most likely being paid by Russia. So yes. Any sort of like Russian, like sometimes I will wear the Russian tracksuit, and hopefully that at some point causes one of these lunatics to actually think I'm Russian and that I'm like a Russian disinformation agent. That'd be hilarious.
I hope you do an entire broadcast in a Slav squat on a tank or something.
That would be great.
Your quads might get a little tired, but it'd be worth it.
The position might be rough, but the tracksuit would be no problem.
Don't lie. As a Russian, you are Slav squatting 24 hours a day, and you would have no trouble pulling it off.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I think that's true. The hit piece thing. I was on the Heel stream, on the Kill stream, the Heel stream show. That was where they raised a bunch of charity money for kids at St. Jude's, and then because that money came from people who made Nazi jokes. It wasn't good enough to save children, and had to be returned. And not only that, but the entire Killstream channel had to be demolished and wiped from the internet.
That was wild, because it showed you like the extent they would go to. Like they would refund the money for the kids. Like that was wild.
Right. Just take the money from the Nazis and give it to the children, and then tell the Nazis they're evil. Like that. That's all that makes it. We don't want your Nazi money. Why not? You want them to have it?
Wow.
You know, like everybody's like, well, I guess I got my donation back. Time to go buy an oven or whatever. Like, good Lord, what was their plan? But that's the short-sighted and vindictive nature of the modern media, and that's to me. You say, yeah, you kind of, once you get big enough, you want the hit piece. But you want the right idiot to write the hit piece. Yeah,
because like the Russian shit is so unhinged, and like that would just be, I would just love like some sort of, because it's such a like ridiculous conspiracy theory at this point. You want them to self-own. You don't want them to be like actually trying to hurt people. You want them to like self-own and just be like a total mockery.
Yeah, exactly. But the scary thing is you might get the effective hit piece, and that would be the worst.
Yeah, and that sucks. My heart goes out to anyone that happens to, because it's maybe at some point, I think it's hard, but at some point maybe there could be some sort of lawsuits. I don't know. You probably know better than I would, like the effectiveness of like any sort of slander or libel lawsuit in cases like this.
The media, especially the online media, is so ridiculously protected right now that it's very, very difficult. It's possible, but it's very difficult to pull off. You have to be perfect. I think if anything, the Covington kids case paves the way. We've got some interesting rumblings from Clarence Thomas, basically saying that New York Times versus Sullivan, which is the higher bar for public figures and the higher bar on defamation cases in general, that needs to be reassessed. And the implication is that it needs to be walked back.
Interesting.
So if the court is willing to, it's a weird position, because the Roberts Court has been so ridiculously free speech, which has been great. But that free speech does leave vulnerabilities in stuff like defamation cases, and they've been really hesitant to take back any sort of speech freedoms at the Supreme Court level. But if they can reassess New York Times versus Sullivan in light of the fact that it was 1977 when they decided it, and we're now 42 years removed from that, and we've got a completely different understanding of how information is spread, and we do have these giant companies coming out, and I mean, you know, New York Times versus Sullivan was Martin Luther King was basically, no, Martin Luther King was arrested, and then someone ran an ad in the New York Times, and the guy they ran the ad against was like the sheriff, I think, who is Sullivan, and I'm going to be fuzzy on those details, but the long and short is, someone else took out an ad in the newspaper, and they called that slander and all this stuff, and created this higher bar because he's a public figure. Yeah. Yada, yada, yada. But now we have the actual newspaper journalists are doing the defamatory stuff, but still shielding themselves with the protections of other people publishing opinions in their paper. And that's a big difference, and does need to be distinguished. And also with the power of online communication and the instant reach and the instant damage of these companies is massive. Yeah. So that's what I hope to come out of the Covington kids case. Yeah. I really don't, man, that first one against WAPO is not strongly written, in my opinion. They have some real big holes in it, and I think they're going to have struggles. I haven't read the CNN one yet, but if nothing else, I hope it's a vehicle to get to the Supreme Court and at least have the Supreme Court reevaluate what this means in our modern communication era. Even if he ultimately loses, it's a case that's ripe to go and change the way that defamation is dealt with, because we frankly need protection. Like,
sure,
the fact that you or I, you know, heaven help us, get to somewhere like 100,000, 200,000 subscribers and become a target for a media company,
right?
That we could be completely defamed, taken out of context, and run through the mud and destroyed before we'd even have a chance to respond. We need to have recourse for that.
Yeah, they'll just label you like a disinformation agent. And there were accounts that they did during the election that they claimed were Russian, and that's all that YouTube needed, and they just pulled the accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
that was a good question. Evan Rogers says, better dead than red, hashtag Trump 2020. Painful Buggery says, the summer before the Trump piss thing, there was a guy on 4chan laughing about how he's feeding some FBI guy that story word for word.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for causing us a bunch of problems, Jackal. No. It's funny, though, so actually I fully endorse it. That's the thing that I think that's where I think we win. In all honesty. So one of the things, I've been covering this Vic Mignogna story in the anime community, and it was a giant, looks like a coordinated Me Too movement, amongst a bunch of squeaky wheels. The only problem is that our side covering it now and fighting back against it, the way I cover it is for maximum hilarity. I look for the funniest possible thing I can talk about while also being serious. But if I maximize the funny and I look for the funniest thing, I find out that tends to be the thing that's true. And that's the greatest part. They don't have senses of humor.
Oh, no, they do not.
And they cannot relate to people in that way. And that's our weapon against them. And I think it's true with the news, too. I mean, even the fact that, yeah, there's some guy... There might be a guy who created the Russian peeing story as a joke to a Fed. Oh my gosh, that makes it a funnier story.
That's great. Oh yeah.
And they'll lose that narrative every single time. Architect of Fate says the Russian probe is anti-Semitic because there are 1 million Jews in Russia. The Mueller report is now alt-right. That'll end it. Evan Rogers says the only good communist is a dead communist. Wow, strong words. Protect the skunks and the commies. An unnamed source says Chenk's face produces as much grease and oil as Texas, and he also believes collusion happened after the election.
Yes, that would be correct.
Cenk is the dumbest law graduate to have a voice. I didn't think that guy, like, I thought he was just a random idiot. And no, it turns out he's a Georgetown law educated idiot.
Wow.
I found that out when he debated Ben Shapiro, which finding that out made that debate even worse. I'm like, wait a minute. You're not only going to debate another lawyer, but you're going to debate a lawyer who spends his entire day talking about this subject all the time for money to millions of people. And Cenk looked like he hadn't researched that for a moment.
No, I don't think he does that for much of the stuff that he covers.
Yeah, that was the most shameful display of lawyer education I've ever seen, because, like, every lawyer I know, no matter what political alliance they are or whatever, would at least read what they're supposed to read and not be like, am I right? Am I right? Like, no, Cenk, you're not right. And you're not winning this. You're losing horrifically. It's embarrassing. Yeah. Oh gosh, what a shame. What a shame. Yeah. Monkey Elvis says they had exculpatory evidence on Flynn and Papadopoulos that they failed to disclose to them. Mueller and Weissman acted very unethically. That's possible. And I think that could be an interesting thing we do find in that 300-page report.
Sure.
And I bet Papadopoulos and Flynn's attorneys are just chomping at the bit to say, you had this evidence. If they could show that they had evidence that they didn't release, it's one of the only ways they could get around a guilty conviction. or guilty plea conviction is to show that the prosecutors acted unethically. Internet Tab says the Guerrilla Channel. Okay. Evan Rogers says the alt-right is just as brain dead as the far left. They blame the Jews for everything while the left believes we are on the verge of the Fourth Reich. There you go. My Party Time 1000 says, me and my homies would have been stacking bodies by now. President George Washington. Oh, so this is an off-topic thing, but that question reminds me. I think when I look back on the Founding Fathers, I think we very much romanticize who these guys were. I think the reality is that they were like actually a bunch of rough and tumble bros. I mean, these guys were out there like fighting and starting wars over stuff that we take for granted today, taxes.
Yeah.
And like we tend to treat them as these like patrician statesmen. But they were all 25 once and they had muskets, man. They're a lot cooler than we give them credit for, I think.
Sure.
Let's see. Valorant, thank you for the donation. Carrie Dalton says, read Brian Cates, who has been right on Mueller. Do you read Brian Cates at all?
Brian, I think I follow him on Twitter. Yeah, I know Brian Cates. He's a good Twitter follow. I definitely follow him on Twitter.
I'll have to check it out. A Scanner Daphne says, previous wars had on-the-ground coverage, not now. There's some, but there's not much. There's not much. Monkey Elvis says, can there be obstruction without collusion? The obstruction of justice. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. Go ahead. I mean, your take. I mean, you have the legal expertise. People, I think, make the argument that there's no obstruction without an underlying crime. I think that would be the argument they make.
The hardest thing for me is to prove that a president of the United States even has the capacity to commit obstruction of justice.
Right.
Like what? The president can pardon anybody for anything. That would, I mean, by colloquial definition, would be obstruction of justice. But like, because the president has the authority to pardon, and it's not an official process, you can actually stop an investigation at the onset. Can he commit obstruction of justice? Yeah. The only way would be if he were obstructing justice against himself improperly. And there's actually a debate on whether or not the president could pardon himself, which is probably what leads to the conclusion that a sitting president cannot be indicted. Because if you did indict a sitting president, they would have a constitutional crisis where the president would say, fine, I'm pardoned. And then they would have to try and determine if he could indeed be pardoned. And that's a gamble, because you'd have to then rely on Congress impeaching him and going through with it, and being okay with doing that when their election results might suffer.
Sure.
It's a very weird game. But I don't know that in any instance other than himself. And of course the obstruction thing was Flynn, right? Like that was the claim, that he was obstructing with Flynn, the Flynn investigation.
Like the firing of Comey and stuff, yeah.
Right. And yeah, that would be a really hard thing to show. I don't know that the president, I'm not convinced that the president has the capacity to obstruct justice, because he could pardon with a mere word. He could directly pardon whoever he wants, and he could preemptively. You don't even need a charge for a pardon. So Prophet Muhammad, which is nice to have him grace our presence.
Sure. Fantastic.
Hard Bastard loves Donna Brazil's big black rooster.
All right. So Donna Brazil wrote a book.
I bet it was riveting.
Oh, well, this part is. This is her words. There was a part in the book, I believe it might have been one of the chapter titles. I'm not 100% on the chapter title, but anyway, the thing in the book was that she got into this argument with some men in the room, and she basically challenged them to a dick measuring contest and argued that she had the bigger dick than all of them. So that, of course, in the chat spawned Donna Brazil's big black dick. And then we also had an alleged Donna Brazil the call-in show. It's clipped on the internet if you type in Donna Brazil calls Hard Bastard, where we had a 5-minute conversation, and her big black dick was one of the things talked about. But yeah, Donna Brazil's book, she makes that reference about herself. It's fantastic.
I think that was definitely her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was absolutely her, no question.
We don't even need to talk about that.
No,
I mean,
not even right.
100%.
Listen and believe.
I am Siler says, Nick, do you think guys that drink Zima are gay? I don't know. I've never drank Zima. Do you drink Zima? Did I lose you again? Okay, either God is funny or Hard Bastard is really funny. But I have lost his audio again. on the all important question of do you drink Zima?
You hear me?
Oh wait, you're back. You're back.
That was God. Whatever being would be in control of that. Whatever being. Now I left, and I might have knocked the mic, and that could have been what caused it. But that's a great question. I definitely would like to hear the answer.
Wait. Okay, so I don't drink Zima. So I have no opinion on whether or not people who drink Zima are gay, because I guess if I would have drank it, I would know, because I'd either become gay or I'd say this drink makes people gay and then lit it on fire and drank whiskey to follow up.
Right.
But I have no opinion on Zima. I just remember the commercials when they came out back in like the 90s.
It's one of the, I guess you would call them gay strikes. I think you get 3 gay strikes and then you're gay.
Sure.
So Zima would be, because I like Zima. It's, I don't know, it's like soda. It's I like it. And
Sure.
so that would be considered one of the gay strikes. I forget what the other one were, but
what are your other
yeah.
What are your other 2 gay strikes? I
don't remember. I'm trying to think. It was Zima. They probably know Zima. Oh shit! I don't remember the other ones. They might know in the chat.
Someone call out his other 2 gay strikes, and we can.
What are the gay strikes? I think there's been 4 at this point.
We could declare him officially gay on the channel if that happens.
Yeah, what are the other ones?
Dick Fingers says, "Thanks for getting me into whiskey tasting, Nick." Oh, you're welcome, buddy. It's big. I'm a big fan. So there you go. Satanic Potato says, "Subscribe to PewDiePie. It wouldn't let me type subscribe for some reason. That can't be right." An unnamed source, because he's got a bunch of spaces in subscribe. So, wait, man, the chat is dropping all sorts of stuff. Gay alarm clock.
Yes, that's strike 2. Okay.
You got traps. Sodomy, sucking cock.
No, not sodomy sucking. The traps is a story that we were watching a Brazilian. We used to do these when streaming was a thing, that we would do these like uncensored segments, and we would watch like Brazilian booty contests. And one time when we were watching the contest,
a dong flopped out of the thong.
Well, no, a lot of the contestants had, I guess, what you would call a strong jaw. And someone in the chat noticed that I guess they could read Portuguese. And apparently on the screen, and most of us did not because we can't read Portuguese. Anyway, in the screen, it basically said like one of these women is a tranny, probably not in those words, but it basically something like that. And then that became the joke that, you know, from then on, we could never look at the Brazilian booty contest the same. So yeah, that's that reference.
Yeah, I don't trust Brazil.
Yeah, too many strong jaws. It's too many strong jaws down there.
In literally anything. Don't trust them at all. An unnamed source says, "Hard Bastard Racket's liver looks like Ginsburg's 6 feet underface." So he's saying my liver looks like Ginsburg's 6 feet underface. Apparently. I don't know how he's seen my liver. I haven't even seen my Evan Rogers says, "The same people who claim to hate Nazis are the same people who hate Israel for existing." Lol. John Sargent says, McClellan's 25-year-old triple distilled single malt scotch. Do you mean Macallan? There could be a McClellan. I don't know. Cesario Acosta says, "I got free Google money, so you get free Google money." Thank you. Cassius says, "I think Kick Vic is running out of dirt. Maybe they need to get a new Magic 8-Ball or buy more fortune cookies for the truth they need." That could be. Party Time 1000 says, "F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you, and me is you and me. N is for..." What's N for? Friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. N is for, I don't know. Hillary Clinton says, "Ha ha ha ha, what? My double tapper failed again. Damn goblin assassins are useless." So that must be a Seth Rich reference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's really a shame what she did to that guy.
Yeah, I mean it's you know, the problem with the Seth Rich story is most of the evidence is circumstantial, so you know it's different. But
Do you think
There's
she
theory.
did it? Do you think she did it herself?
No, I don't think Hillary Clinton did it herself. No.
Do you think Bill did it?
No. I think it's just like one of these people that goes on the rather large list of very interesting coincidental deaths of people who do things that the Clintons don't like.
I will be very clear. I genuinely believe he was murdered for political purposes.
Oh, I agree. I think he was the leaker. There's just not direct evidence he was the leaker. I think there's very strong circumstantial evidence that he was the leaker to WikiLeaks, but it's not direct evidence. Yeah, no, I think he was the leaker, and that's why he was killed. Yeah.
I just didn't want people to think that I was like questioning that narrative, because that's one of the few conspiracy theories that I definitely I think is true. I think it's true. Too many weird things happening there. Uncle Bobbity says Desmond's a victim. Send the mother to Gitmo.
It's fine. Might be a little harsh, but at this point, save the kid. That's fine.
Save the kid. Is Desmond that drag queen kid?
Yeah, he was doing the parents were having him do the striptease at the gay bar. Yeah, and apparently that was embraced by mainstream media.
Yeah, I don't know that those parents would fare well in Gitmo, so maybe that's a good place to go.
Sure.
They'd have a new soccer ball by the end of the week.
Yeah, they would be praying to Mecca. What is it, twice a day or whatever?
Yeah, 5. I think 5 times.
They'd be there.
I was explaining on stream the other day why Gitmo isn't closed, and the interesting thing about it is that nobody wants those prisoners, and those prisoners don't want, like, so back in 2008, I think it was, which is Hamdan versus Rumsfeld, was the Supreme Court case. That's the one where they I think it was 2008. That's the one where they decided that these guys in Gitmo could get a habeas corpus hearing in a civilian court, not a military court. And so they can. None of them have taken them up on it. Not one.
Wow.
Because could you imagine bringing a Gitmo guy to a New York jury for trial?
Yeah. Forget it.
Like that's what would end up happening. And it'd be absurdly dangerous. Like the security around that trial would be massive, because there'd be real problems with it. But 2, none of the Gitmo guys, like their lawyers are like, no, stay here. You've got a Quran, you've got meals, you've got soccer, you've got yard time. And when you go back, I don't know if you know this, but like ISIS, I don't think is friendly with the previous regimes.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be good.
So they're a different brand of murderer. And those guys don't want to get out in a lot of ways. Wow, it's kind of weird.
Interesting.
And the countries don't want them back either. So it puts the U.S. in a weird position.
Yeah.
So an unnamed source says, at Shiak, I hear you, wink face. The Coke Master says, to my fellow California gun people, buy magazines while you can before we F it up. We need to flood the state with millions of mags. Cass the Cat says, I just wanted to add more Kiwi shekels. Sure. Thank you. Dark News Network says, the Earth is a flat electromagnetic domed titty.
Yeah, this would be the person that did the debate. Dark News Network. Yes, that was one of the revelations of the debate was Earth titty. It was fascinating.
Oh, that's because of the firmament is breast shaped, I'm guessing, over the Earth. That was
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a diagram. He drew a diagram and it looked like a titty.
We don't need to catapult people into the sun because they'll just hit the firmament and splatter. That'll be perfect. Caleb Cooney says the Earth is flat. Clinton is a reptile. And wait, I was going to make a joke, but one of these might be true. Yeah, when she was falling into the van, she was actually just shedding her old skin.
Yeah.
Name says we are living a real life Tower of Babel collapse. I don't know if that's true, but maybe. Our languages are being separated in interesting ways. Some of us speak the language of meme, some of us speak the language of boomer, and others of us speak the language of social justice. So maybe maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. Cars in Depth says, Nick, but so many of those vaccines were developed by Jews. How could they possibly be helpful? Oh my gosh. Caleb Cooney says, Trump has surprised me in the best sense possible. I truly thought him to be a snake in the grass, but now I think him to really care about the people. Caleb Cooney says, on time, not gay, and killing my family member. Raccoon. I got it. There you go. I can smell you says, have you seen Casual Otaku's Kick Vic skit? No, I did a panel with that guy, and I've seen the video thrown around. I should probably watch it. I hope it's good. I hear it's good. That guy was nice. I met him at a convention. Cherno Trollopoulos says, if you want to release a skunk, get a hazmat suit. Yeah, there you go. Colin Schrader, thank you for the donation. Zypher Warrior says, how many subscribers to let Drexel shave your head? None. We will not have a shorn head, and I will not let that man near my head with a razor. Robert Chalk says, Nick, if you're a skunk, you get dunked. Rekieta versus Nick doing his best Rorschach impression with the coons, the animal kind. Colin Schrader, thank you for the donation. The Dark Lord X says, you just absolutely love animal murder, huh? Jesus. No, I just don't believe that animals are all that important in the scheme of things. And when they put my animals and my money in danger, well, my animals and my money take precedent over pests. That's just... Jason Groothouse says, as a recreational Q follower from overseas, I am flabbergasted to see things happening we guessed from clues over 8 months ago. Do you follow Q?
Q's a little too cryptic for me. I kind of the type of person, like, if you have something to say it. So I've talked about it before. Like, I think we all want the same thing. So, and I definitely defend the Q people when they get hit pieces on them from the corporate media. I don't think that, the corporate media acts like they're dangerous and they blame them for, like, shootings and stuff. That's all total bullshit. Yeah, like, I hope Q's right, but I'm not necessarily convinced.
Yeah, I don't know if Q is either just a good guesser or what, because I don't have time. First of all, I can't figure out how to operate the 4chans. I don't know what 4chans there are. And so, like, following Q is something I don't have anywhere near enough time for. So I don't have an opinion on him. But like, from what I've heard about him, I'm like, I can't figure out if he's a good guesser or if he's just putting things together quickly, or if he's like a group of people that are putting things together quickly, or if he's some sort of insider. I got nothing.
Yeah, I hope it pans out. What is it? The storm is, like, basically what they're waiting for. I hope the storm comes, and if it comes, I'm gonna have a fucking celebration on stream. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the deal, that, like, we want the same stuff. So,
is the storm where, like, all of the stuff just starts coming out just in rapid succession or something?
Yeah, and there's, like, a lot of indictments, and also I believe there's, like, this thing where there's, like, a bunch of sealed indictments that they think could possibly be, I don't know, like, I guess Trump behind the scenes, or like Huber behind the scenes, kind of like making moves and bringing everyone to justice. And I hope they're right. Yeah,
that would be fun. It would be fun to have amazing. A day of the justice rope.
Yeah, it would be great.
Putting everything. Rod Franklin says, easy with the cop talk there, killer. No. I'll never apologize for my position on cops. Like I said, at the end of the day, I want every cop to go home, but I also don't, I don't like that the state puts cops in a position where they have to kill the citizenry. Don't like that. I want less laws that put cops in that position. How's that? Cherno Trollopoulos says, the only problem with the media is that the big tech companies give them power by banning people. Google, Facebook, YouTube, etc. would be fine and can be worked around, but Visa and MasterCard are the real issue here. Now, have you followed that all? The tyranny of payment systems.
Oh, yeah. There was several people. There was the, I think, Jihad Watch guy. There was this woman. She's like a burlesque dancer. I think she has made an independent comic book. She lost her Chase Bank account.
Martina Marcota.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's insane. It's completely insane. And and from what I understand, at least from what we were talking about the other night in the chat, it seemed like one of the reasons the Peterson Rubin Patreon option, they're having trouble launching it, is because they can't find any sort of bank that'll guarantee that there won't be deplatforming. So it seems like this is kind of like there's no way around it. It's like in the banking system.
I think the problem with the reason that Peterson and Rubin can't get their Patreon thing off the ground is because they're involved. That's my answer to it. Is
meaning like they're just not going to be capable of doing it, or
no?
just...
That I'm sure they have like 48,000 more planning sessions to go before they'll get to it. They have to think about it more.
I got you.
These guys are very much, now they've been very successful in their life in various ways, but I think they're very much thinkers and not enough doers. I don't know if are you familiar with Dick Masterson at all?
Yeah, didn't he come out with his own option like within a couple weeks? Yeah,
new project 2. He put it together in a weekend. Basically, he went to a local bank. He got merchant services from the bank, found a way to get them to accept. I guess the main hurdle was getting that bank to be able to process large amount of transactions. At a specific time. They worked it out, and then he built the software on like a WordPress engine, and that's it. That's all it really took.
Interesting.
And his terms of service is transparent. Part of the problem you mentioned, actually, what I'm kind of joking about is that Peterson and Rubin are going to try and ask a bank to guarantee that they won't ban someone. No bank on earth can make that guarantee because they're not the shot caller.
Right.
So what you have to do is just, like with Dick's system, it basically says, look, if a bank says that you can't be on there, then you can't be on there. But until they do, you can. And that's the term of service. So, that's just how it's going to go. But ultimately, you're not going to get a bank to try and promise to override MasterCard when MasterCard comes calling, because a bank can't be kicked out of the ACH network. They can't survive without merchant services.
Right.
So they're not going to go. But and shockingly, on New Project 2, he's got people who were otherwise banned from all of these other platforms. So, yeah, and they're not shut down yet. So
good.
Maybe.
Yeah, I wish them the best of luck. That would be. We need alternatives.
Yeah, and by the way, you can find my New Project 2 link down in the description.
Yeah, I think I'm like debating on starting either Subscribestar. I don't know. Aren't they invite only? You have to like request an invite. That might be the better site to go with.
For New Project 2?
Masterson's. Yeah, that might be.
Yeah, if you want an invite, just I'll get you in touch with him. No problem.
All right, cool. Yeah.
I'm sure he'd be happy to. He just doesn't have an easy system to open it up to everybody.
Sure.
But my understanding is that if people are wanting to use the service and they're not complete idiots, that he'd be happy to help him out. But I don't want to speak for him, but I'll get you in touch. Just message me if you're interested.
Okay.
Jason Grudhouse says, oh wait, no, we read that one. Sakaki Onsai says, Cenk Unger versus Shane Holmberg. Who is worse? Cenk, because people actually listen to Cenk. That's the scary thing. No one listens to Shane.
Yeah, I don't know who that is. Shane Holmberg?
Shane Holmberg is probably the proper name for him. No, he's a guy, again, with his Vic Mignogna situation. He's a guy who has professed to be involved in running anime conventions for several years, and he wanted to debate me on some legal topics on my channel. And so I had him on, and it was a shameful display of stupidity coming out of his mouth. And so it was, it was a very bad choice for him. And I don't know why it didn't have to be. I was going to have a friendly conversation with him and just educate him on parts of the law that I think he just got wrong as a layman, which is kind of what I do on my channel anyway. Just try and bring law to understanding. But no, then he doubled down and kept saying I was wrong. So I had to teach him why he wasn't. And the worst part was, so I go ahead and explain, like we got to a hypothetical topic and I explained how all this would work. Took like 5 minutes. And then I got done and he said, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. And he was,
oh my God,
he was reading his Discord, who was trying to Google stuff on the fly, and they were wrong.
Well, that's ridiculous.
It was embarrassing.
That's a clown show.
Also, he had a shoe on a cutting board in the background of his shot, and we're not quite sure what he was planning to do. If he was going to sous vide the shoe or grill it or broil it, it's hard to determine. But and I believe we have confirmed that is actually a shoe. Some people thought it was a blender base, but no, it's a shoe. Anyways, Cherno Trollopolis says, how do we as free speech supporters beat the likes of Visa and MasterCard? Crypto is not a solution because normies won't use it. Also because Visa and MasterCard are set to make crypto easy for normies to use through their services. And so you won't, like, your crypto transaction at your grocery store is going to be processed by Visa and MasterCard, and they're going to turn your Ethereum into money.
Right.
Like, that's how it's going to happen. They've already got that system set up. So I don't know. I don't know how we beat the likes of Visa and MasterCard. Just build your own planet, man. Crone Dome says, can you try for a conversation with E:R next? I don't know who that is. Who's ER? Do you know who ER is?
Is he the person that the media made a hit piece out of because PewDiePie mentioned him in a video, and they didn't like some of his videos? They said they were naughty, and like he joked about the Jews, and I think they didn't like that.
Don't joke about the Jews.
Yeah, they don't like that.
That would be horrible.
Yeah.
In other news, I'm implementing a new policy due to popular demand of the chat. I will no longer kill raccoons and skunks. Instead, all of my kids' Thomas the Tank Engine train sets will be retrofitted to accommodate skunks and raccoons, and we will move them off into camps where they can live happy, productive lives. No more killing. No more killing of skunks and raccoons. They will be put on trains and moved into safety camps. So, but we cannot have Jew jokes
no.
or anything like that. That is not acceptable in modern sensible discourse. No, I mean I'd talk to ER. I guess I have no idea who it is. Lulu CC says, Shane, quote, neither Monica nor Jamie will lose in court if it ever gets there. Bank on it. Best April Fool's joke ever. Yeah, I'll trust that guy's assessment of what will happen in court as much as I'd trust him to watch a toddler. Bob Newby, Lord of Noobs, says, what if Nixon had pardoned himself? They were worried that he would. They were actually very, very terrified that the president of the United States, who had control over the armed forces and the power to jail the journalists and Congress involved, might actually use it. And then instead he resigned. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. That would have been a very interesting way to civil war. But he in theory could have pardoned himself. Maybe. We don't know. That's the thing. The power of the pardon is not limited in the constitutional text. It just says that the president has the power to pardon. It doesn't say everybody but himself or everybody but his family. So we don't know. And how would you rule on it? It's an executive power. It's plenary authority in the Constitution. The Supreme Court may actually say, you know what, this is a political question. And that's why we have impeachment, which is outside of the criminal process, right? Like, that's the whole purpose, is impeachment doesn't need a crime. High crimes and misdemeanors is not defined anywhere. So it literally could be he pees on the newspaper.
Yeah.
So get him out. But the impeachment is a political process, not a criminal. Bloodreich says, I mean, George Washington did single-handedly start the 7 years / French Indian War. So there you go, I guess. I'm not a history buff by any means. I just find that, you know, these guys are dueling. Like Jefferson shooting people in the White House lawn.
Yeah.
Hamilton's getting shot by Burr. You know, these guys are shooting each other. They're fighting. They're starting wars and stuff. It's much different times than we kind of think back on, in my opinion. At least in like a traditional education. Live Bearer Fancier says, I had to drown a rat because it was terrorizing and attacking my black Japanese bantam, a small chicken breed. There you go. Matt Schrodinger says, N is for no survivors. Okay. John Sargent says, JFK Jr., who was running against him when he died. I have no idea what that's in response to. Uncle Bobbity says, outer space is not inclusive enough. Gitmo to space. Ash Sapali says, if you don't like ISIS, you could let them fight. Rickard says, hey, Nick and Bastard, what do you prefer, AK or an AR, and why is it the AK? Also, Mexican food is greater than Italian food, which is less than Chinese food. So they're saying
chill for Italian food, of course.
But he's saying Italian, like if I read the thing correctly, Mexican food and Chinese food are both better than Italian food.
I mean, Mexican food is fantastic. But I have to, of course, support my people. So I'm always going to go Italian.
What about the AR versus AK question?
Doesn't AK have the bullets like the way that they like project through the air? They kind of fuck your shit up more.
I think the ARs tumble through the body in a way that's more designed to wound the 5.56 round, whereas the 7.62, yeah, they're more of a killing round.
Yeah, I like the ones that cause a lot of damage, so I'd go with that one.
Yeah, it's certainly a bigger round, and they're devastating. I don't know. I've never fired an AK though. I have an AR. Had before I lost it in the lake. Government. Had an AR. Really enjoy firing it. I don't know. I like all guns, man. I don't like have to have favorites, do I? Can I have both? One in each hand? Dual wielding assault rifles?
Dual wielding is great. You probably won't hit a lot, but it's fun.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the rate of fire will overcome the inaccuracy.
You could probably practice enough, maybe. I don't know.
I think that's my summer project. Dark News Network says plus minus dipole, so there's two titties. Sun and moon are the nipples. There you go. Thank you for clarifying. Ron Elm 2000 says, let us teach you the ways of 4chan. That would be a funny live stream, right? Learning 4chan with the chat. Uncle Bobbity says, in order to recognize these skunks from the cats, would you consider providing the skunks with humane tattoos on their forearms? Perhaps a little logo. Well, in the alternative, I guess they could wear patches or something on their coats. I don't know if that would work. Skunk 8 Chili Akasit says, when will Russell Greer be on the stream to defend his honor? You should host Russell and Taylor Swift at the same time. Hashtag not a date. I mean, that would be the biggest live stream in the history of the world. So I would definitely do it. Taylor, I know you watch this channel. Consider coming on my show with Russell Greer to talk out your issue. Jesse N says, I invented a new drink. 1 ounce Fireball, 5 ounce hard cider. I call it an apple Cinnabon. That might be the only acceptable way to eat or to drink Fireball whiskey. God, I hate Fireball whiskey. Ugh. Yeah,
really, I like it. It's not like there's something about the sweet whiskeys that seems wrong, but I do like Fireball. It's wrong. There's something wrong about it, but it's delicious.
Well, what's wrong about it is it's disgusting.
You would have loved. I was at this place that makes whiskey in West Virginia, right? And I ended up getting this corn. It was like moonshine. It was like this corn whiskey. It was really rough going down. I kind of like that. But they made this peach and also an apple whiskey. It was like drinking candy. It was delicious. It was just. I don't know. It's just something. I didn't get it. I got the harder shit because there's something. I don't know if it's good to drink whiskey that's real smooth that'll just go down. You can almost gulp it down. It's probably not the best move. You need to pay for it a little bit.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of like that smooth whiskey, especially when it's this Nadura stuff is very smooth, but it's 60% alcohol.
Does it burn?
Not really. It's pretty.
I like the burn.
I mean. It's got a little bit just because of the alcohol, but I mean, they've smoothed it out really well. If you like the burn, you got to get yourself a bottle of Lagavulin 12 year. The 16 year is pretty easy to find. The 12 year is sold at cask strength. So it's about 55, 58. No. I think it's 62% alcohol. And it's got all the smoky peatiness of Lagavulin, but with an extra kick of alcohol and not as many years of aging. So it is brutal, man.
That sounds great.
It hangs out in your mouth and throat. It's got an oily sort of residue of burning that sits. It's like an Exxon Valdez oil spill that gets lit on fire in your mouth.
But after 4 or 5, you probably enjoy it.
Oh yeah. Your first, have you ever had Lafroig or any of those heavy peated whiskeys?
I've had heavy peated Scotch. Does that make sense?
Yeah. This is a Scotch. These are Scotches too.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you like that peaty, earthy taste, with the smoky fire, I mean, you cannot beat it. It's brutal. It's brutal on the mouth. And yeah, the first couple sips are offensive, and then you just start to love it.
Yeah.
But you breathe out fire afterwards. Yeah. The the sweetest whiskey I've had that was really good. I was at a Minnesota Twins game, and they had a special drink, and it was a whiskey-infused liquor in an apple cider drink. Not a hard cider, but just it was an apple liquor inside apple cider, and it was, oh my gosh, I could have drank like 100 of them. Very dangerous. Very dangerous. Robert Loso says, I failed to understand why people find it so hard to understand shall not be infringed. I mean, that is a weird constitutional question, right? Like, we have it all over the place. Shall not be infringed, and we infringe it left and right. Yeah. I still think it's because of Marbury versus Madison, and I think the Supreme Court was not actually designed to do what it does. What do you think about this? So I mused on this a long time ago in one of my shows, that the Supreme Court does not need to be a single entity the way it's implemented now. You know, we have 9 justices or whatever, but that's all due to the Judiciary Act, right? The Judiciary Act of 1892 or whatever, where we decided to put limits on the justices. At first, it was like 6 Supreme Court justices, and it eventually grew up to 9. But there's no constitutional requirement for the number of justices, or even like that it should be odd. And we know that FDR threatened to stack the courts with an extra 10 justices to get his New Deal through. My thought is that Marbury versus Madison is a bad ruling. Court should not have constitutional review. The Supreme Court could actually be a giant entity with equal authority that just has, you know, thousands of Supreme Court justices, but they don't have the power to make massive decisions about what can perpetually be enforced, that they're supposed to actually take these cases and controversies on a case-by-case basis, and that's how the system was designed. Any opinion on that or thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily be opposed to that. The problem is, like, how would you even go about would it even be practical to like attempt to change that?
At this point, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you'd get there. I think that the question would be, would the Supreme Court ever uncuck itself and strike down Marbury versus Madison?
Wow, probably not.
Probably not, because they love that power, but or what if there was a constitutional amendment to say that the Supreme Court does not have the power of judicial review? That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Because they took it, right? It's not in Article 3. Nothing even resembling it is in Article 3. The closest thing we have is one of Hamilton's Federalist Papers saying that basically they have to do that. But that's it. It's just a paper from one guy who is a Federalist and actually a large aggregator of government power in a time where aggregating government power was very unpopular. But he found it necessary. So it's weird. It's weird that we've stuck with it in this way, or that it survived so early, actually, because they didn't have the power to do that. But anyway, I don't know. John Sargent says Hillary Clinton, New York Senate seat. Okay. I don't know what that means.
I'm not sure.
Bloodreich says it is true. This is about Washington. He was an upstart in the British Army and kind of slaughtered a whole French patrol in the Northwest Territory when he was supposed to be doing recon. Oh, I think I watched Molyneux talk about that in his Truth About George Washington series, which I do actually recommend because it's a very different view of him. L. Ron Humperdinck says, Nick drowned his AR too. WTF, madman. What's up, hard bastard?
Yeah, what's up, man?
Meximan and Cheese says, please give the skunks a nice hot shower. The Anime Collector says the modern Tower of Babel thing boils down to our inability to successfully climb local dominance hierarchies, due in part to competing for certain jobs within the entire world over the internet. He follows up with working in VFX, for example. I compete for jobs with people for what are essentially slave wages. Yeah, I'm finding that in anime that the rate of pay in producing these largely consumed pieces of media is very small. It's not like Hollywood, where a lot of people get paid very well. The Anime Collector says the inability for a lot of the population to climb the hierarchy is causing a breakaway civilization between capitalists and socialists. That's an interesting theory. Might be true. We got 3 left, buddy, and then we can kind of wrap up here. Lulu CC says, Nick, how do I get in contact with you to be a possible guest on the stream? Would love to join the beard crew and show off my Irish beard for everyone. Stand with Vic. Vic kicks back. You can email me, man. My email's in the description. That's a way to do it. John Sargent says HRC linked to suspicious deaths. Yep. Phoenix 76 says, there you go. I just bought a Lagavulin 12-year just to know. And that's a good thing to do. That's a good thing to do. Lagavulin 12 years is a great thing. Well, man, that's the chats we've got. I think we've covered the subject matter we wanted to talk about. Did you have any closing thoughts? Oh, I should have said earlier, but your link to your channel is the top thing in the description. So if you're from my channel and you don't know anything about Hard Bastard, go check out his channel. If you like it, obviously subscribe and support him. Does coverage on the stuff you want to know about. Do you want to plug anything or talk about anything else?
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. It was a great discussion. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you to all the people that suggested me as a guest and the people that came in from my chat. Thank you very much for your support.
Yeah, and thank you guys for coming over. If you ever want to come talk about legal stuff, or if you ever want a legal speaker on your show, man, always look me up. I'm happy to either host or guest anytime. So
sure, absolutely.
All right, guys, I think that's about it. So I'm going to say goodbye to the chat. And then if you want to stay on just a second, I like to say, shut the stream down and then actually say goodbye to my guests privately. Sure. I like that better. Sure. Thanks, guys. You guys have a good night. Tomorrow night, we will have something else. Wednesday night, we will have Russell Greer's former employer along with Sriracha. That should be hilarious. And watch for me soon on the Drunken Peasants. We're trying to work out a appearance on there. And check out Hard Bastard's channel. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a good night. Peace. Peace.